On the surface, the man is a hunter who can crush glass hunters with one hand. But in reality, he is an alien who only wants to retire. Little Green is the most powerful magician on a planet with magical civilization. But one day, he suddenly had an idea, which was to quit this rough job. Because this is a society where services are provided free of charge. Even if you work until you die, you will not get a single cent of salary. What's even worse is that due to advanced technology, they don't need to eat, drink, or sleep and are on call 24 hours a day. As a result, at a young age, he became addicted to overtime work, and he couldn't even remember the last time he hinted at leaving get off work. How much he wanted to leave, but because of his heavy responsibilities, he couldn't just leave. Those high-ranking officials even imposed restrictions on him in order to prevent him from escaping. For example, when he tried to teleport, his head would be electrocuted. Even if he managed to escape, there was no place to hide on this planet. He also thought about killing his boss, but unfortunately he couldn't attack people on the same planet. Not only that, he couldn't commit suicide even if he wanted to. Just when he was thinking about resigning, an idea suddenly occurred to him. Although his body was imprisoned by magic, his soul was free, because there was no magic in this world that could control the soul. In other words, all you have to do is abandon your body and escape with your soul. 10 years passed like this, and Xiaolu struggled between persistence and giving up every day. Finally, after countless repeated attempts, he completed a unique magic soul manipulation. He wanted to separate his soul and escape to a planet where no one could find him. The moment his consciousness left his body, he couldn't help but feel overjoyed. Success, success, I am indeed a genius. Finally, I can leave this rough place. I wonder what you bastards will do without me. With the excitement of leaving his job, Xiao Lu came to a blue planet deep in the universe. When he opened his eyes again, he had become a human being, and from now on he was the male protagonist. Although he felt a little uncomfortable at first, Xiaolu was very satisfied with the result. After all, he successfully retired, right? Next, he first felt the state of this body, and then prepared to accept the original owner's memory. In order to smoothly integrate into this society in the future, he had to disguise himself to the extent that even the parents of this body could not find out. But the plan is perfect, the reality is cruel. The memory of this body is like fragments, intermittent, and can't be remembered at all. At the same time, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, and waves of acid continued to flow out of his stomach. Damn, I didn't expect this body to have starved to death. Before coming here, he only thought about finding himself a race with the highest intelligence and a body with the highest magic power, but he actually forgot about his current physical condition. This was a huge mistake. In order to survive, he had to eat something sweet and fresh to fill his stomach, so he had to struggle to get up and walk outside. Then he saw the sun for the first time. Most of the surface of his hometown is liquid, a dark place without sunlight, and now a colorful world appeared before his eyes. He was fascinated by both the warm sunshine and the fresh air. He really wanted to feel them for a while longer if he wasn't starving to death. But why is there nothing to eat around? No, if this continues, I will really starve to death. It was at this time that Lord Lan finally found something edible. Although the little guy is not big, the problem is that now is not the time to be picky about food. So Xiaocheng was caught with a fierce look on his face, and then got closer and closer to the bloody mouth. At this critical moment, a child passed by the hero. Looking at what was in the kid's mouth, the male protagonist suddenly felt that the cockroach in his hand was not tasty anymore and threw it aside. Now there is an important question: should we rob or not? No matter what, just follow him first. The male protagonist followed him all the way, and the kid also found someone following him. He turned around and was frightened by the other person. The next moment he turned around and ran without hesitation, completely ignoring the male protagonist's request to wait. In the end, the kid escaped smoothly with his nimble hand, and the male protagonist followed him to an unknown place. Fortunately, there are a few pots of ornamental plants here. Although they don't look like they are edible, the male protagonist can't care less. However, at this moment, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the distance. At the same time, there was a child's cry. It was the child just now. Although he didn't know what happened, the male protagonist decided to go over and take a look. At this time, the little boy was trembling and looking forward, because a giant bird was standing in front of him. Strange monster, It was the first time for the man to see a woman in his life, just because she was an alien who had just traveled through time. Just now, the male protagonist heard a scream and looked over, only to see a giant bird chasing the little boy. I didn't expect to see this kind of monster on the street on my first day on Earth. This is really a rough world. But the male protagonist soon changed his mind. In some ways, this might be a good thing, because according to the residual memory of this body, birds are a delicious delicacy. A mere monster is nothing to a great magician. Once he gets used to magic, conquering the planet won't be a problem. Just at this moment, he suddenly found that his body was surrounded by fluorescent rays. This feeling of having all the cells in your body swept through is magic. But what's going on with this amount? It's really too much. If the magic power in his hometown could only reach his feet, then the magic power here was so much that it was like falling into a swimming pool. At this moment, the hero felt himself stand up. In such a place rich in magic, he will be able to do anything. And at this moment, the little boy ran to the male protagonist and asked him for help. This kind of thing is a piece of cake for a great magician. But the hero has one condition, which is to take the thing in the kid's hand. Although the little boy was a little reluctant, but when he heard the noise behind him, he instantly understood the importance of the matter and said, "I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Please save me." The deal was done. The male protagonist asked the kid to hide behind him first, and then he got into position. He wanted to separate the monster's flesh and bones with a wave of his hand. But after waiting for a long time, nothing happened. At this time, the kid looked at the male protagonist as if he were an idiot. The male protagonist is also a little skeptical about this. What's going on? Could it be that he was too nervous after coming out to explode? Seeing that the male protagonist is strong on the outside but weak on the inside, the kid who saw that things were not looking good decided to leave. The hero is still trying various things, such as explosion, fire spirit, curse, and all kinds of magic. In the end, I could only come to one conclusion: this body couldn't use magic. The male protagonist, who realized the reality, began to flee in panic, shouting for help as he ran. Unfortunately, even though I was on the street, there was no one who could help me, and for some reason, the monster just kept staring at him. The body, which was already extremely hungry, has now reached its limit. Seeing that he couldn't outrun the opponent on the main road, the male protagonist decisively changed direction. The monster was not willing to be left behind and also made a sudden turn to attack. To make matters worse, the monster suddenly remembered that he could fly. Looking at the giant bird swooping down on him from behind, the male protagonist felt that his first day of time travel might be awkward, and at this critical moment, his knee actually twisted. At this moment, he seemed to have seen his grandmother. The next moment, he fell to the ground due to inertia, and the giant bird flew straight over his head. Then there was a series of death tumbles. Finally, the monster's huge bird beak slammed hard into the wall. The male protagonist looked at the feathers flying in the sky and didn't react for a moment to what was happening. Then he went forward to check, and looking at the huge motionless body, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Could it be that he had died by hitting his head against the wall? Is this guy a fool? I really want to ask the scholars on Earth how such stupid creatures could evolve. But now is not the time to think about these things. The male protagonist touched his hungry stomach and drooled. This bird should be edible, right? After all, they are all creatures from the same planet and their body compositions are similar. However, before he could figure out how to start, he suddenly heard a voice behind him. The male protagonist turned around and saw a capable and beautiful woman in professional attire appearing before him. It turned out that the kid ran to ask for help out of loyalty. Shen Yu Yen was a professional hunter, so she knew what the monster was. The Fikino killer is a bird that lives in the space gate in the desert. It has a speed comparable to that of a missile, and hunters below level C are no match for it. Therefore, she had to resolve it as soon as possible before there were heavy casualties. However, when she found this place, this is the scene she saw. At this moment, she began to doubt her life. Did she solve this problem by herself? At this time, the little boy's brother and a policeman also arrived. The police stepped forward to thank the male protagonist for helping to catch the monster. While Shen Yu Yen squatted on the ground to check the cause of death of the monster, It looked like it was killed hidden. Could this person be a clever hunter or above? The hero doesn't care about anything else. The moment she sees the little boy, she has forgotten everything else. She stretched out her hand, looked at him seriously and said, "Did you forget the agreement?" Although the boy was reluctant, he still handed the thing in his hand to the male protagonist. The male protagonist drank it without hesitation. At this moment she finally felt alive. Shen Yu Yen looked at this scene speechlessly. This was like snatching snacks from a child. The man had clearly killed a monster, but he was almost invited to have tea directly because she did not have a monster-killing certificate. Just now, Shen Yu Yen from the Hunter Association reached out to express gratitude to the male protagonist. And then the male protagonist unceremoniously extended his hand covered with an unknown liquid and shook it. Shen Yu Yen instantly felt dirty, and without caring about being polite, she took out a tissue and started wiping her hands. At the same time, she asked the other party to show her hunter certificate because she wanted to report to the association. But the male protagonist had never heard of that thing, so he made up an excuse that he didn't have it now. When Shen Yu Yen didn't say much and asked the other party to tell her his name, and she would check it with the hunter system, who would have thought that the male protagonist looked guilty, just because she didn't know the name of this body yet. Seeing the other party like this, Shen Yu Yen was silent for a while, and then asked the male protagonist in disbelief, "Didn't you register as a hunter? Are there any awakening checks? You should know that it is illegal to use your abilities at will without registration." The male protagonist didn't understand what the other party was saying, but she knew that this was not going to go well, so she lied that she had registered, but she just forgot her hunter's license at home. Then she asked the other party to wait here and she went home to get it. After saying this, he turned around and left without waiting for the other party to answer. At the same time, she secretly decided in her heart that she would never take this path again. The male protagonist successfully found his ID card when he returned home, but he couldn't find his hunter license no matter what. As expected, his original identity was not registered. She also found some unknown items in the house, and it was at this moment that she remembered that her original self was actually a smoker. At this moment, the male protagonist almost died of anger. Smoking is a taboo for a magician, because magicians need to directly absorb external magic power through the respiratory system. So it is unimaginable for them to hurt their lungs. No wonder this body can't use magic. At this moment, the male protagonist felt a little regretful, wondering why he didn't think of removing the defective body. But she quickly cheered up. "After all, I escaped with great difficulty. I can't give up just because of such a small matter. A happy and fulfilling life is waiting for you." Then she was arrested just a few hours after arriving on Earth. It was because she was starving when she went out again, and she finally found a restaurant to eat a full meal. Then she was arrested for eating a free meal without money. Fortunately, a policeman recognized her as a hunter who had just killed a monster, so she was let go. The male protagonist was very grateful for the policeman's help. He bowed to thank him and prepared to leave. Before leaving, the police took out a leaflet and handed it to the male protagonist. It turned out that the police noticed that the male protagonist had not registered as a hunter, so they kindly reminded her to go to the Hunter Association for a free awakening check. Although the male protagonist doesn't know what awakening is, judging from the other person's appearance, this should be common knowledge known to everyone on Earth, so he decides to go over and take a look. Then she remembered that the original god had been here before, but the original god had only awakened to the lowest level F. Thinking of this, the male protagonist felt like a bolt from the blue, and just as he was pressing on, he was suddenly interrupted by a voice. It turned out that Shen Yu Yen, who had just dealt with the monster and returned to the association, happened to see the male, so he stepped forward to say hello. She was curious about what the male protagonist came for, and also wanted to take a look at his hunter's license. The male protagonist then remembered that he had just tricked the other party into going home to get his license. Fortunately, he recovered some of his memories, so the male protagonist apologized to the other party and admitted that he lied. In fact, she did not have a hunter license, and Shen Yu Yen was speechless. "No wonder you didn't come back after waiting for a long time." The male protagonist then explained that he had already registered for awakening, but his level was too low, so he did not apply for a hunter license. Shen Yu Yen was a little confused, and the male protagonist said proudly, "I am grade F." When Shen Yu Yen was shocked instantly. "What? Then how did you take down the Fikino killer?" Then I heard the male protagonist say that the stupid bird died by hitting its head against the wall. The answer was so bizarre that there was a moment of silence. Although this is not impossible, why is Shen Yu Yen a little unfortunate? After all, the way he looked at the other person at that time was like looking at a bug. This was not the behavior of an level loser. But if he was lying, why did he hide it? You have to know that those who do this are usually dangerous people. Could it be that this person is also Shen Yu Yen, who couldn't figure it out, finally laughed and said that he understood? You're lucky, the Vicino killer just doesn't have a brain. Looking at the forced smile on the other person's face, the male protagonist instantly understood that people on Earth express their emotions by controlling their facial muscles. He needs to learn this well, and then the male protagonist's mouth corners slowly curled up. Yes, I'm really lucky. This smile is full of criminal atmosphere. Shen Yu Yen was stunned. There really is something wrong with this guy. The man just gave a simple smile. But it scared the woman opposite him so much that she almost died. It turns out that the male protagonist was imitating the girl's fake smile just now. Shen Yu Yen felt that there was something wrong with this person. It's better to leave safely first. But before that, he took out a banknote from his pocket and handed it to the male protagonist. Xiaolu was very excited when he received his first payment in his life. Where did this good man come from? But he was still curious why. Shen Yu Yen explained that this was a portion of the body of the Vicino killer. I didn't expect that thing could be sold for money. The male protagonist's tears of excitement flowed from the corners of his mouth. He didn't understand why the bird was so valuable. Was it because of its feathers? Little do people know that its real value lies in its runninjin. A crate runninjin is worth 2 million. The male protagonist can't pretend he didn't hear this. He immediately asked why he only had 50,000. When Shen Yu Yen looked helpless. After all, the losses caused by fighting monsters were compensated in his name. If someone did not run away, the hunter would have been exempted from responsibility. At this moment, the male protagonist only felt a pain in his heart, and he apologized to the other party embarrassedly. And Shen Yu Yen seemed to have heard something incredible. Then he turned and walked away, saying, "It's okay, have a good afternoon," looking at the other person's back as he left. The male protagonist couldn't help but clench the banknotes in his hand. Unexpectedly, in his hometown, those mortal creatures who looked like flying insects were worth 2 million. And to enjoy life on Earth, he needed a lot of money, so at this moment, the hero made up his mind to become a hunter. To be honest, he couldn't see the future clearly until just now, because his original body was so poor that he couldn't even afford a bowl of soup. But now it's different, because he knows that hunters can make money. In that case, from now on he'll make a living by hunting with magic. Although he couldn't use magic now, the hero was thinking about where to go to find monsters, and then he heard people around him talking about an empty door. So he followed the gazes of the crowd and saw a space vortex in the air that was emitting special magical fluctuations. There are monsters here, it seems that we need to analyze it. However, there are too many people here, it is inconvenient, he cannot go in without a hunter's license, and he doesn't know if there are other monsters nearby. Suddenly, the male protagonist sensed a familiar breath. If nothing goes wrong, there should be another empty door nearby. So the hero followed the breath and climbed up a mountain. The journey was very smooth, except that his health was too poor and he almost passed out from exhaustion. Looking at the yellow stripe blocking his way, the male protagonist didn't know what it was, but felt that the aesthetic sense of the people on Earth needed to be improved. Then he swaggered towards an empty door. Not long after the male protagonist disappeared, another pair of people came here. Because this empty door has been frequently mutating recently, they came to investigate the cause. As they went deeper, they didn't see any monsters around. Not only did this not arouse their vigilance, they even ignored the warning from the first-level hunter and Runxing in the team. Soon they paid the price for their ignorance. On the other side, the male protagonist had entered a very deep position in the empty gate, but he also did not encounter a single monster. This made the male protagonist a little confused. Could it be that there was something wrong with his understanding of Yaikongmen? At this moment, he suddenly sensed a wave of magic power. This small but energetic magic power came from humans. This meant that someone had entered here. The male protagonist followed the fluctuations of magic power all the way to behind a huge rock, and then saw the scene in front of him. The team just consisted of 4 people. But in the blink of an eye, only 3 people were left. This scene directly scared the other 2 guys. Seeing this, and Runxing loudly reminded the 2 to cheer up if they didn't want to die. However, before he could finish his words, he felt a chill coming from behind him. At the critical moment, and Runxing used his shield to block the fatal blow. Then he slammed the ground hard, jumped high, and then kicked the stone man with lightning speed. By the time everything calmed down, the stone man had turned into rubble. The other 2 looked at this scene in shock. As expected of a level 1 hunter, even though he's a defensive type, and Runxing ignored the 2 men's flattery and told them to pack up the bodies and leave quickly. However, he soon felt a chill coming from behind him again. This time he didn't have time to do anything and was grabbed by the man's hand. Then he was thrown away like a bug. Another man in the team looked at this scene in horror, and the next moment the stone monster's attack came upon him. The man immediately swung his sword at the other person. However, with just 1 shot, his sword broke into 2 pieces. What followed was that he was knocked away by a punch. This scene directly scared the last woman silly. Facing the impending fist of the stone man, he even forgot to run. At the critical moment of inertia, and Runxing, who had recovered, blocked the attack for him. Now was the best opportunity to use the binding magic. If they could not trap him here, they would all be wiped out here. However, at this extremely critical moment, this woman actually abandoned her teammates and ran away alone. Can you believe it? When the aliens participated in the copy for the first time after arriving on Earth, they fully realized what human nature is. Not long ago, the male protagonist entered an empty door alone, and then hid aside to watch an adventure team being killed by monsters. I saw that one of the women was about to hide her hatred on the spot. Out of inertia, his teammates appeared in time to block the fatal blow. Originally, this was the best time to use the binding magic. If they didn't control the monster here, they would be wiped out. But who would have thought that at this critical moment? He actually ran away alone. At that moment, the man's eyes were full of disbelief. As expected, the man was knocked to the ground by the monster's punch. In the last moments before he lost consciousness, and Runxing only felt a sense of emptiness in his heart. He had once awakened a first-level talent by chance, but he had rejected many invitations from large unions. Then he found a few good people to form a team, and thought everything would go well. Who would have thought that the final outcome would be so tragic? Seeing that the other party was about to be offline, the male protagonist who couldn't bear it finally stood up. Thanks to the other party's efforts just now, he finally completed the analysis. Don't be fooled by the fact that this guy in front of you looks like a big servant, but he is actually an old-style golem. The so-called golem is a kind of puppet driven by magic in the protagonist's planet Alpha House. The golem does all kinds of things, from small tasks like sweeping the floor, running errands and carrying bricks to big tasks like war puppets. Everything is available. Their planet can be said to be a country built with golems as the labor force, and the hero's major happens to be weapon golems. However, although he said it with full confidence, it is actually not easy to deal with. Even though this guy is a mediocre master and his attack is slow, the protagonist's body is too weak and he will be exhausted after a few times. But the protagonist finally sees the opportunity because the big gem on the golem's arm is actually a magic recognition sensor. As long as the sensor inputs a stop command, it can be stopped. Although for a normal golem only its owner and maker know the emergency stop command, this model is so strong that the male protagonist knows it without even looking. Just as the male protagonist wrote down the stop command, the huge golem lost power and fell to the ground. Of course, this alone is not enough. If you want to shut it down completely, you must remove the core on its back. Then the hero started to take action. Of course, there is no pressure on such small things. Looking at the things in his hand, the male protagonist couldn't help but sigh. It's very simple. When Runxing opened his eyes again, what I saw was the moment when the male protagonist was showing off what happened. Did he defeat the monster alone? At this moment, in Runxing's eyes, the male protagonist already looked like a master. Seeing the other party wake up, the male protagonist jumped off the monster and walked towards the other party. Seeing this, Runxing was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. Because in this situation it is easy to be silenced. But no matter how he struggled, his body couldn't move. But the male protagonist quickly came to his side and looked down at him condescendingly. Anruan Shengben thought he was finished. Who would have thought that the other party would stretch out a hand toward him and ask, "Do you need help?" And Runsheng, who successfully survived the crisis, received widespread attention from the media, but he was not happy at all because he knew it was all thanks to that person. However, the people in the Hunter Association wanted to take the credit for this achievement. Although they knew that someone else had killed the monster, how could Runsheng not even know the other person's name? If the other party is really a hunter stronger than Runsheng, there is no reason for him not to know him, unless that person is not registered at all. So no matter how much Runsheng objected, the people in the association advised him to accept it, otherwise it would affect his image. But no matter how the other party persuaded him, Runsheng wanted to speak frankly, because this was the most basic respect for the hunter. In the end, the people in the association understood his determination and stopped persuading him and let him leave. Although Yan Jing didn't want Runsheng to take the credit, he also hoped to meet this hunter who was both powerful and upright. At this time, the male protagonist they have been thinking about is opening the door to a new world. He is deeply fascinated by the unknown when he plays with his mobile phone for the first time. The people on Earth are simply gods. He hasn't stopped since he accidentally unlocked his phone last night. Everything above attracted his attention. This was the paradise he had been expecting. Thanks to the cell phone, the male protagonist easily got the information he wanted. He learned that to enter the Ikamon Gate, one must follow a strict hierarchy, and that any awakener who wants to enter the Ikamon Gate must register as a hunter with the Hunter Association. At the same time, he also found out that the guy was actually level 1, but he had to put other things aside for now because the most important thing for him was to get the hunter license. Obviously, other people traveled through time just to experience and enjoy life, but when it comes to the male protagonist, he almost starved to death. In order to survive, the male protagonist had to sign up to become a hunter. The first thing after signing up is to receive a safety theory education about the Icon Gate with other people. The male protagonist listened to it boredly. To sum it up, it's nothing more than not being too cocky in front of monsters. After the safety education is completed, the staff sends the equipment to everyone. The male protagonist looked at the thing in his hand in confusion, not understanding what it was. I didn't expect that in this day and age there are still people who don't know about this thing. Others laughed at him and asked if he was from outer space. The male protagonist beside him was sweating profusely. What happened? My alien identity was exposed. The staff told the male protagonist that this was a popular analyzer, and then told him how to use it. After everyone got the equipment, the educator asked everyone to point the camera at the butterflies in the sky. The hero followed the command instrument, which immediately displayed the monster's level name. It turns out that people on Earth use this to identify the identity of their enemies. In addition, the staff also told the male protagonist that this analyzer can not only analyze monsters but also detect equipment. When Yan's male protagonist immediately shown a photo at the staff, but nothing was displayed, it seems that this person is not good enough. Then the male protagonist started to use it on the plants next to him, and the information really appeared, but when he used it on the land, nothing was displayed. The male protagonist doesn't understand why this is happening. Could it be that this thing can only recognize things with magical powers? Whether an item is useful or not can be determined based on whether it has magic power or not. Although it is convenient, it is not very accurate. After all, some things are useful even without magic power. This ordinary soil is a typical example, because soil is a rare item that can be used to make magic absorbent. But it seems that no one here knows this. Obviously, as long as magic science has developed a little in the world, it is impossible that he does not know about the magic absorbent. Suddenly, an idea flashed in the male protagonist's mind. The next moment, he stopped the staff and said, "I want to ask you something." The staff told him to ask. The male protagonist did not hesitate to ask the question in his mind. When did the magic awakener first appear? The Wonyen staff gave the correct answer without any hesitation. Of course, it was 7 years ago. One day 7 years ago, various awakeners appeared simultaneously all over the world. The male protagonist listened to this answer in disbelief. What? Only 7 years? You should know that the history of magic in Alpha House is more than 60,000 years. It turns out that I have been living with a group of primitive people. Thinking of this, the male protagonist couldn't help but shed tears. He said how could it be possible that only electronic engineering had made a leap forward. But then again, even if he used the magic absorbing potion, no one would know. Hunters have always been one of the most sophisticated, high-profile groups in the media, but it is different from what ordinary people imagine. Life for a low-level hunter is hell. Moreover, the body that the male protagonist possessed had a problem with one of its legs. Now I can't use magic, so I have to find a job before I starve to death. In order to deal with monsters, the male protagonist got a lot of magic absorbers, and there are indeed monsters on this earth that can be killed with these. The problem is that the monster lives in a clever empty door. The male protagonist, who is only Flevel, is not qualified to enter. He had just arrived on Earth and was still unfamiliar with everything, and he was not able to do the business of absorbing magic potions. This is a bit uncomfortable. At this moment, the phone suddenly shook violently, which scared the male protagonist. The male protagonist picked up his phone and saw that it was a disaster warning. A Blevel monster has appeared, so everyone should evacuate as soon as possible. Hide. How is that possible? At a time like this, of course you would choose to go out and watch the fun. The male protagonist put on his clothes and went to the street, only to see the people around him running away in panic. On the TV tower not far in front of him, a huge Blevel monster was roaring for 2 days. Of course, there are also some people who are not afraid of death and are watching. The surrounding area had already been cordoned off. At this moment, the male protagonist was suddenly hit. Instead of apologizing, the person who hit the man was disgusted with the man for blocking his way. The male protagonist looked at the other party with a gloomy face, and the other party thought he wanted to fight. However, the male protagonist did not understand what this meant at all. "I'm just looking at you." The male protagonist seems to be very fierce. The yellow-haired man's attitude became much better. He said he was a hunter and reminded the male protagonist to stay away. The male protagonist said unyieldingly that he was also a hunter. The yellow-haired boy asked the male protagonist what level he was. Then I heard the word F uttered from the male protagonist's mouth. Wei Yen Huangmao almost died of laughter. Ha ha ha, what rubbish. The male protagonist looked at the other person in confusion. What is this guy laughing at? The man is obviously just a frank hunter, who would have thought that he would get an rank answer. Just when a monster suddenly appeared in the city center, the bored male protagonist decisively stepped forward to join in the fun. In order to prevent the monster from hurting ordinary people, the army sent out helicopters to try to stop it, but their attack was just a tickle to the monster. The monster simply flicked its tail casually, and the helicopter turned into a huge fireball and fell to the ground. Fortunately, the supporting hunter finally arrived at this time. 2 ordinary people were about to fall into the monster's mouth. A hunter jumped directly from the helicopter and cut off its huge tongue with a knife. The monster roared in pain, and then he turned around and ran away without hesitation. At this time, another hunter took aim at the target, bent his bow and drew his arrow. The next moment, 2 arrows accurately hit the monster's tail. The arrow was not going well, so the monster, a giant lizard, decisively cut off its tail to survive. But it's obviously too late to run now. The protagonist's old acquaintance, and Runsheng, jumped directly from the plane, and then kicked the monster's back with the force of an army. The monster fell from midair to the ground on the spot, and Runsheng didn't give it any chance to breathe. The powerful warrior's blow hit the monster's belly again. Just with 2 hits, the monster that was just showing off its might lay motionless on the ground. Seeing the performance of several professional hunters, the crowd was so excited that their eyes were sparkling. After dealing with the monsters, the men walked towards the direction where the male protagonist was. Recently, the male protagonist learned one thing, that is, the extreme hunters have become the backbone of this world. That's why everyone likes them so much. Just like now, everyone is so excited that they want to become a dog. However, this person, the first time he saw the male protagonist, he took his hand with both hands. Then he looked at the male protagonist with reverence like a little boy and greeted him. Whenever he thought of the other party solving the golem stone in a cave, and Runsheng felt that he was so handsome, the yellow-haired guy who had looked down on the male protagonist before, now looked at him with cold sweat on his face. What the hell, what's going on, is he a big shot? Seeing this guy peeking frequently, and Runsheng looked at him gloomily and asked if the male protagonist was his friend. He was almost scared to death when he bumped into the yellow-haired guy. He stumbled and couldn't utter a word for a long time. However, Enrunching ignored him and happily introduced himself to the male lead and handed him his business card. Of course, he also asked for the male lead's name. Next, Enrunching invited the male protagonist into the grove. Of course, don't get me wrong. He just wanted to repay the male protagonist for saving his life. It just so happened that the male protagonist needed help with something. So he took out his phone, pointed to a location on the map and said, "Can you come with me into an empty door?" Soon, the two of them entered a deserted door. Until now, Enrunching still couldn't believe it. A hunter as strong as the male protagonist is only Flevel. It turns out that just now, the male protagonist had already told the other party his true realm. But how is this possible? Enrunching wondered if the measurement was broken. But he soon figured out the truth, because those who are awakened above the ultimate level need to participate in the dungeon compulsorily. Therefore, some people who do not want to be manipulated by the evil cult will fabricate false awakening values. And in his eyes, the male protagonist is undoubtedly such a person. The two of them advanced through the dungeon, and soon the male protagonist found the target of this trip, which was a group of monsters that looked like bats. Enrunching was curious about what the male protagonist would do, but he just took out a handful of dirt and threw it into the sky. The next moment, the bats turned into fireballs and fell to the ground. The effect of the magic-absorbing agent was immediate. However, after seeing this scene, Enrunching had a doubt. That is, the problem can be solved with bare hands. Why do we have to use props? The male protagonist was speechless about this. Does this guy have hunter syndrome, judging by his toes? But Enrunching suspected that the male protagonist had been standing at the top for too long, and had forgotten the ecological environment of the hunters in the next episode. Seeing the other person like this, the male protagonist realized that no matter how he explained, it was useless. In this case, there is no need to expose your weaknesses. So the male protagonist suddenly had an idea and started talking nonsense. After awakening, some people can lift a 1-ton truck, and some can manipulate elements out of thin air. These are very convenient abilities. But since these forces appeared out of thin air, they could also disappear out of thin air. I'm a little scared, so I don't plan to rely on awakening abilities. I was worried about the other person's misfortune, but in the end, I saw Enrunching crying because he was moved. You are right, why didn't I think of it? The easier it is to get something, the easier it is to lose blood. The man is a dignified class hunter, but he has his eyes on the class male protagonist. He even causes a car accident just to get the male protagonist's contact information. Not long ago, the male protagonist and Enrunching just walked out of the copy, and then they rewarded themselves with some junk food. Enrunching asked the male protagonist to continue to take him with him if there was such a thing in the future, because his team had just disbanded, he had too little experience alone, and he didn't want to form a team again. The male protagonist understood his thoughts very well. After all, he had just experienced a teammate being stabbed, and anyone would have some psychological trauma. Moreover, in order to enter the advanced level, he needed to team up with a high-level hunter, so the male protagonist agreed to this request. Of course, the male protagonist first emphasized to Enrunching that you must protect yourself. I don't have the ability to save you. The male protagonist has been telling the truth, but Enrunching doesn't believe it. He thought the boss was worried about his own injury. The next day, the male protagonist received a call from Enrunching while he was having dinner. There was a new copy open, and he asked the male protagonist if he wanted to go and take a look. Of course, the male protagonist excitedly agreed. Whenever a new empty door appeared, the Hunter Association will send someone to investigate and temporarily restrict access until the investigation is completed. It is said that a special plant was discovered in this empty gate. Considering that unknown plant, it might be the key to restoring his magic. The male protagonist decided to go in and take a look, and leave immediately if it was not there. At this moment, a luxury sports car suddenly came in time, and then a man with blue hair got out. Seeing this guy wearing black sunglasses and looking arrogant, I was shocked. The male protagonist asked Enrunching next to him who the other person was. The answer given by Enrunching was somewhat unexpected by the hero. The other party turned out to be Jiang Changhao, one of the only 3-level hunters in the country. The hero could see that his magic power was very stable and he was indeed a rare genius. While the male protagonist was observing the other person, Jiang Changhao suddenly felt something. The next moment, their eyes met, and the other's reaction surprised the male protagonist. There seems to be something special about his eyes. And Runsheng whispered to the male protagonist that it was the dragon's eye, a rare item. While the two were whispering, Zhang Chonghao looked at the two of them strangely. Then he ignored Runsheng, the first-level hunter, and looked straight at the male protagonist, asking his name. After getting the answer, he asked the male protagonist what his hunter level was, and Runsheng smiled and took over the conversation, saying that the male protagonist was just his porter. However, Zhang Chonghao just looked at Runsheng with disdain and said, "I'm not talking to you. The big guys can't afford to offend." And Runsheng was so scared that he hid behind the male protagonist, and the male protagonist calmly replied with an F grade. Wenyan Zhang Chonghao laughed sarcastically. Really? The other party's behavior made the male protagonist somewhat suspicious. Could he see through the hidden magic of this body? Although due to the injury to the respiratory system, the magic power cannot be output normally. But the total amount of magic power in the body will not decrease, and Zhang Chonghao can see a person's potential through the dragon eye. But no matter what, the male protagonist will not admit it. After all, he has an officially certified hunter certificate. However, Zhang Chonghao didn't believe that an F-level person could look him in the eye. He was about to invite the male lead to cooperate, but was suddenly interrupted by Runsheng, and Runsheng said that we have something else to do, and then pushed the male lead away without paying attention to his struggle. Only after the two of them were completely out of Zhang Changhao's sight did Runsheng explain to the male protagonist why he did this. Because the man had a criminal record, no one was willing to enter a dungeon with an S-level criminal, and Runsheng had a relative who was ranked 3rd in a level, and he was attacked when he entered a dungeon with Zhang Chonghao recently. So Runsheng was afraid that the other party would attack the male protagonist, so he took him away. The male protagonist was deeply moved when he figured this out. What lovely breastfeeding tears. Since the opponent is so dangerous, let's forget about it today and cut the plant later. But there is one more thing. Since the opponent's dragon eye is a prop, does he have dragon lung? If I change it for myself, wouldn't it solve the problem of not being able to use magic? And Runsheng helped me check, and it really exists. The price is not bad. 26 billion. What did you say? 26 billion. This one sentence immediately extinguished the male protagonist's newly awakened passion. It's better not to listen. The poor male protagonist shed tears of resignation. Soon the two said goodbye, and the male protagonist took a taxi back alone. In the car, he checked Zhang Changhao's information, and the more he looked, the more terrifying he felt that the other party was. If I had known that, I would not have looked at him. What if he wanted to harm me? But as the saying goes, what you fear will come true. A supercar suddenly appeared behind the taxi and hit it with a single step on the accelerator. With a burst of violent brake sounds, the taxi turned several circles on the spot. Finally, it crashed into a pole on the roadside and stopped. The male protagonist rolled directly under the seat. The driver, who had recovered, first looked back at the male protagonist nervously. Seeing that the male protagonist was not injured, he got out of the car and started to curse. "Do you fucking know how to drive?" As a result, Zhang Chonghao got out of the car. "I'm really sorry. I haven't driven for a long time and I got the brake and accelerator mixed up." After that, he took out his phone and asked for the male protagonist's contact information, saying that he wanted to discuss solving the accident. As for the driver, he just threw a handful of money at him and told him to get out. The male protagonist watched this magical operation speechlessly. The driver got the money and ran away. Zhang Chonghao, who was left, asked the male protagonist to hand over his mobile phone number again, saying that he had no cash but would transfer the medical expenses to him. Is this how car accidents are handled? The male protagonist felt that his eyes had been opened, but he still gave out his cell phone number. In this way, the S-level hunter finally added the contact information of the F-level hunter after much trouble. Zhang Chonghao was originally a rich second generation, but he had a history of violent crimes. Although he found a powerful lawyer to handle the matter, his negative information was everywhere on the internet. The biggest scandal about him was that his parents died in a copy explosion a few years ago. After the accident, he immediately sold his parents' company, and many people suspected that he did something unethical for money. Of course, that's just a rumor without any evidence. At this time, Zhang Chonghao looked at the male lead with interest and said, "I have a job that makes money. Do you want to listen to it? The man was obviously just a low-level Slevel hunter, but the high-ranking Slevel hunter wanted to team up with him. He was even willing to give up 80 of the profits from the dungeon for this. This Pinthesky condition surprised the hero. Could it be that the other party saw the potential of his body? Does that mean that when he can use magic, you can easily take this planet into your hands? Thinking of this, the male protagonist said arrogantly, I can't enter the Slevel empty door now, and I don't know if I can work with you. However, Jiang Changhao's next words brought him back to the cold reality. What are you thinking about? It's impossible for a hunter of your level to enter the advanced level. It turns out that Jiang Changhao wanted to be the man behind the male protagonist and train him personally. Realizing that he had misunderstood, the male protagonist wanted to disappear on the spot in embarrassment. So that's how it is. But he still has a question. What do you like about me? Jiang Changhao's mouth curled up slowly. Well, you will know about this later. The male protagonist, who seemed to be in a bad situation, made up an excuse and escaped. Then he told An Runsheng about it. Now that I think about it, that guy obviously crashed the car on purpose after listening to the protagonist's experience, and Runsheng was more certain that the other party liked to cause trouble for high-level hunters. The protagonist also agreed with this. What should I do? Want to find the police? But what is the reason? Does that mean that an Slevel hunter has to protect himself and give himself equipment? Wouldn't this be considered a mental disorder? The helpless male protagonist can only choose to give up. At this moment, An Runsheng suddenly mentioned the latest news, which said that humans will soon be able to conquer the disaster of Yikongmen. This is a good topic. The male protagonist is very interested in the existence of the empty door. An incident happened in this world 7 years ago. A void and monsters began to appear in people's lives. At the same time, there are also awakened humans. Others may not know why, but the hero understands. The principle of magic is to use the magic power released by the stars. But the Earth's rock layer is too thick to allow the magic power to reach up. However, the sudden appearance of a void caused the magic power to rise to the ground, which then led to the emergence of awakened humans. But there is one thing that the hero can't figure out, which is what is the purpose of creating an empty door? The monster inside must want to kill humans, and the equipment dropped is just bait placed in the trap. But if the little mice avoid the trap and start eating only the bait, then whoever is behind it will become very angry. And Runsheng felt that what the male protagonist said made sense. But the male protagonist was suddenly startled because he felt a force boiling like lava coming from under his feet. And the place where this power erupted was exactly under An Runsheng's feet. And Runsheng had no idea about this. He was curious about why the male protagonist suddenly stopped. But the male protagonist didn't have time to say anything. He pushed An Runsheng out directly. Then, under An Runsheng's incredulous gaze, a tremendous amount of energy suddenly rushed into the sky, wrapping the male protagonist in it. And he felt the teleportation force coming from his body. The male protagonist realized something and regretted it. He should have pulled him back earlier. Just like that, when the male protagonist came back to his senses, already in a white passage, the male protagonist couldn't help but look around. Could this be the inside of an empty door? It would be terrible if he encountered a monster in such a narrow place. So the male protagonist had to take action first. However, with this body that couldn't even release magic power, he really didn't know how to pass the level. He walked along like this and soon came to an open area which was blocked by a huge stone gate. There was a stone tablet in front of the door, and it seemed to have something written on it. The male protagonist was about to observe carefully, but suddenly he noticed someone coming from both sides. One of them happened to be Jiang Changhao, who had improper thoughts about him, and he didn't know the other one. Soon they all arrived in front of the stone tablet, and for a moment they formed a three-way confrontation. Jiang Changhao came up and said to the other person in a sarcastic tone, "Hey, Zhang Shashin, I heard you were in Singapore," while the other person said, "I'm returning to China today." It can be seen that the relationship between the two of them is not very good. So the male protagonist asked Jiang Changhao, "Do you two know each other?" This sentence shocked the two of them. Jiang Changhao put his face close to them and mocked them on the spot, saying, "It turns out there are still people who don't know you. It seems you have to work harder." The male protagonist just wanted to say that I didn't know you before. Then he listened to Jiang Changhao's explanation. His name is Zhang Shashin, the #1 hunter in H country. The male protagonist didn't expect that the other party was such an awesome guy. Next, Jiang Changhao introduced the male protagonist, an ordinary Flevel hunter. The two of them simply greeted each other, and then Zheng Xiaxin pressed a button on the bracelet. This was an analyzer, and the male protagonist didn't expect there was such a simple design. Soon the results were analyzed. This is an unconfirmed empty gate. No relevant information. Level X. Seeing that it was extra level, Zheng Xiaxin felt troubled. The male protagonist doesn't know what X stands for, so he takes out his phone to check. As a result, the phone displayed a black screen, and the male protagonist, who encountered this situation for the first time, was stunned. It turned out that this was interference from an empty door. If I don't get out soon, my phone will be ruined. So they began to study the stone tablet, and it was written on their fingertips, which was truly a symbol of faith, and it became the key. Although I don't know what this sentence means, it seems that my only option now is to push open this huge stone door and move on. This is a team with two of the strongest level hunters. But they tried their best but couldn't shake the small stone door. The male protagonist was shocked by this. Among the awakened ones, Slevel is a special existence. They were monsters with terrifying powers. But now they were helpless against a stone door, since I don't have enough strength. So the only thing I can try right now seems to be this strange lion project. Jiang Changhao came to a conclusion after taking a quick look. Judging from the size of the hole, it seemed like it was just big enough to put an arm in. This sentence silenced the other two. The male protagonist had guessed something, but he hadn't decided whether to be the first to go up. Zheng Xiaxing walked over first and put her arm into the lion's mouth without hesitation. At the same time, a loud rumbling sound was heard, and the male protagonist and Jiang Changhao went to look for the sound. As a result, the door that had been motionless just now opened by itself. The male protagonist saw that Zheng Xiaxing's face seemed not very good, so he asked him what was wrong. Then he saw the other person raised his hand. It turned out that his blood had just been sucked. He was so scared that he wanted to pull his arm out but couldn't do it. He even thought about cutting it down. Jiang Changhao didn't care about these things. It wasn't his own blood that was being shed anyway. Now that the door is open, let's go. The male protagonist felt something was wrong at this time. Is it really that simple? The three of them continued along the passage, and then an identical gate and an identical lion appeared. Seeing Jiang Changhao's collision, his face instantly darkened. Damn it, it happened this time too. However, Zheng Xiaxing directly pushed the other person away. There was no time to hesitate now, and she had to leave here as soon as possible. The next moment, he reached his hand in again. The result was the same as before. The door opened automatically. Then the three of them saw the next stone gate. This time, Zheng Xiaxing hoped that Jiang Changhao could complete it, because the amount of blood the lion sucks has changed. I didn't feel anything the first time, but I felt a little dizzy the second time. If nothing unexpected happens, the amount of blood sucked will increase as time goes by. So Zheng Xiaxing hopes that the two of them will take turns. But it is obvious that Jiang Changhao does not have the spirit of dedication. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to cooperate, Zheng Xiaxing's face changed instantly, and Jiang Changhao had an arrogant expression, saying, "What can you do to me?" The atmosphere between the two of them became increasingly tense. The male protagonist was about to interrupt, but instead of waiting for his fatal blood to be sucked away, it is better to take the initiative now. But before he could say anything, Jiang Changhao spoke first. "Isn't there another person? You go find him." Hearing this, the male protagonist instantly realized that something was wrong. Although there were no monsters here, it was not a safe place. Considering the maze where you can move forward as long as you offer blood, it seems that you need to offer a person as a sacrifice to leave here. Thinking of this, the male protagonist burst into tears. "I'm done." However, Zheng Xiaxin's moral level is obviously much higher than Jiang Changhao's. With two pairs of glass in the team, you still want to push the foreign object to this glass? As soon as the words fell, several people noticed something and looked behind them, and then saw a monster appear out of nowhere. I was surprised to see that I bumped into the male protagonist. It seems that there is nothing here. The next second the monster started to attack, and his first target was the male protagonist. The male protagonist's current body obviously couldn't block this attack, and he closed his eyes in fear. Zhang Shixin bent down and drew her sword. Then she thrust forward, and the monster was killed on the spot. This handsome performance directly regarded the male protagonist. As for the other guy, let's not talk about him. At this moment, another monster appeared and attacked Zhang Changhao from behind. Seeing that the other party did not respond, the male protagonist quickly reminded him loudly. However, Zhang Changhao's emerald eyes just slightly tilted back, and the next moment he punched the monster hard to the ground. Seeing this terrifying power, the male protagonist guessed that his awakening skill was for physical strengthening. Zhang Changhao roughly estimated the monster's level with one punch, which was probably a clever monster. At this time, Zhang Shixin reminded everyone not to take it lightly. Hearing this, the two of them followed his gaze and saw the shadows of several monsters appearing on the walls on both sides. Soon, monsters jumped out one after another. In the blink of an eye, the three of them were surrounded by monsters. Although they are not high-level monsters, the large number of them is very annoying. The two hunters who disliked each other left their backs to each other. Then Zhang Changhao clenched his fist, which glowed green. He punched out a green wave of air that destroyed everything in its path. Zhang Shixin clenched her weapon tightly. Then he swung his sword and a blazing storm swept across the area. The male protagonist watched the performance of the two-level hunters in surprise. All the monsters were led away by them, so there was no one on the hero's side. Soon Zhang Shixin felt a little tired because his physical strength was weakened due to the blood being sucked. And there are so many monsters, this won't work. Just then he suddenly saw the red eyes of the stone lion. Then a light bulb went off in his head, so that's how it is. The man was clearly the top-ranked glass hunter, but he was knocked unconscious by a bottle during a dungeon. Just because his teammates guessed that a sacrifice was needed to clear this dungeon. Just now, Zhang Changhao and Zhang Shixin dealt with a wave of monsters. Although the monsters were not too strong, there were too many of them, and the hero was greatly impressed by their performance. It seems that the plan to conquer the earth is still a long way to go. At this moment, Zhang Shixin asked the other two to look at the stone statue. The lion's eyes were glowing red. Then Zhang Shixin told her, guess, if this empty gate is not filled with blood within the specified time, a group of monsters will appear. But before he could finish, a monster suddenly appeared behind him. Zhang Shixin was about to die as soon as she saw the guy who attacked from behind. Zhang Changhao then asked with great interest, is there a time limit? As soon as the words fell, a large wave of monsters rushed out one after another. Seeing this, even Zhang Shixin felt a lot of pressure. He no longer counted on Zhang Changhao. He shouted the male lead's name, hoping that he would donate blood first. Who would have thought that before the male protagonist could reply? Zhang Changhao suddenly turned around and rushed towards the stone statue without any hesitation. Even when faced with countless monsters blocking his way, he did not stop at all, and finally he successfully put his arm in. The next moment, countless monsters disappeared like ink. The male protagonist and Zhang Shixin looked at this scene in surprise. At the same time, the door leading to the next level slowly opened again. At this time Zhang Changhao turned around and asked who would be next. Zhang Shixin said that the two of them would take turns because Class F might not be able to hold on, and he is indeed a national hero. The high-quality male protagonist admires him. Thanks to him, his clothes are not dirty until now, which makes the male protagonist feel a little embarrassed. In this way, the three of them passed through the stone gate several more times. Due to excessive blood loss, even Zhang Shixin, who is the strongest person, couldn't bear it. The strong man hurried forward to support the other party and asked him if he was okay. Zhang Shixin said palely that it was okay. This kind of sudden Xingyi Kong men is usually small in scale. They should be close to the exit. The male protagonist looked at Zhang Changhao, who was still full of energy, and felt that it was fortunate that it was his turn to open the door this time. However, Zhang Changhao suggested stopping first. After all, no one could guarantee how many doors there were behind, and both of them were almost at their limit. Zhang Changhao thought they might have missed some clues and needed to go back and look for them. Zhang Shixin only felt that the other party was delaying time, and might even want to take advantage of the monster tide to attack her. Just like when he attacked Cui Jin before, Zhang Changhao fell into silence in the face of the other party's suspicion. Then he turned and walked towards the statue without saying anything more. However, he said that the matter of Choi Jin was just a misunderstanding. Of course, he also understood why he was not trusted. After all, he had a criminal record at this time. Zhang Changhao turned around and looked behind him. Zhang Shixin, you are too wary of me. Even if it is your turn to donate blood this time, I will suggest going back to check the room. As he spoke, Zhang Changhao had already reached his hand in, and this time it was obvious that he could not hold on any longer. Seeing this, Zhang Shixin walked up to him and asked him worriedly if he was okay. When Zhang Changhao said no problem, he brought recovery medicine with him so he can hold out for 2 more times. As he said that, he started to take things out of his bag, and Zhang Shixin said that if they couldn't see the exit in the next room, they would think of other ways. The male protagonist watched Zhang Changhao take out a bottle of recovery medicine, and was thinking that this person was quite normal. But then he saw him holding the bottle and thrusting it towards the unsuspecting Zhang Shixin. With a bang, the bottle made close contact with the back of Zhang Xiaxin's head. Just like that, the strongest glass hunter was knocked down by a bottle. Zhang Shixin lost consciousness on the spot, and the male protagonist next to her was stunned. Zhang Changhao was very satisfied with the result. He didn't expect this trick to be so useful. The male protagonist asked Zhang Changhao with a cold sweat on his face why he did this. And Zhang Changhao explained that this empty door was very similar to the iron lattice empty door that appeared in Northern Europe. If nothing unexpected happens, only one hunter who enters a gate can leave. And judging from the recent X-copy survival rate statistics, it has nothing to do with the hunter level, and the survival rate is only about 60. So just in case, Zhang Shixin has to bear the consequences. The male protagonist thought about it carefully and realized that what he said was right. If someone must be sacrificed, it would be best if it wasn't me. Besides, aren't there 2 classes? The responsibility cannot possibly fall on a class like me. Having said that, but the male protagonist felt guilty after all. So when Zhang Changhao was about to put Zhang Xiaxin's arm in, the male protagonist suddenly interrupted him. He patted his chest and said, "They'll take this room." When Zhang Changhao glanced at the other party. "What? Are you feeling guilty? Just be quiet when I give you a head start. They'll get you out of here alive." Judging from the amount of blood the lion sucked, this trial was almost over. But as the stone door slowly opened again, the male protagonist was surprised, because the scene in front of them finally changed. A statue quietly appeared not far away, and in the hands of the stone statue quietly lay the reward for this clearance. Both of them stared in disbelief. The export ended so easily. Zhang Changhao felt that this was unscientific because the cost was too small. "I thought I needed a living sacrifice, so I knocked Zhang Shixin unconscious. But this is not going to work. If Zhang Shixin wakes up and investigates, it will be a disaster." However, the hero ignored the other party's hesitation and calmly walked to the statue to take the final reward. It was obvious at a glance that the thing in his hand was a precious magic item. However, the male protagonist had no greed at all. He proposed to give this thing to Zhang Shixin as an apology. But Zhang Changhao thinks it is useless. You have to know that the person he attacked was the number 1 hunter. Not only him, even the evil cult will not let him go. The best way to deal with it now is to take advantage of the opportunity to kill the other party. Anyway, the corpse will disappear with the empty door by then. But the problem is that there was an eyewitness. Zhang Changhao doesn't believe that the male protagonist will save his life. The male protagonist asked the other party what he was going to do. Kill him? This made Zhang Changhao a little sad. He couldn't bear to do that. It's just a small request. Zhang Changhao patted the male protagonist on the shoulder. Then she stared at the male lead with ill intentions. "Can you say that you knocked Zhang Shixin unconscious?" The man just completed a copy. The results attracted much attention, just because he admitted that he knocked out the top-ranked glass hunter. Just now, Zhang Changhao suggested that the male protagonist take the blame for himself. The reason why he did this was just to see if the male protagonist was real or not. Zhang Changhao's eyesight is different from that of ordinary people, because he has a pair of dragon eyes. That was a rare item he got from a monster green dragon. With it, he could not only increase his magic power, but also see far away, and he could directly determine a person's awakening value through these eyes. Since he got these eyes, he has never squinted to see anything. Until recently, he met the male protagonist and saw a strange magic in him that he had never seen before. So he went straight up and asked the other party's name and level. When he learned that the other party's level was only F, Zhang Changhao's first feeling was that he was a liar, because it is impossible for an F-level hunter to look directly into his own eyes. In the eyes of ordinary people and low-level awakeners, high-level awakeners like him are like ferocious beasts, emitting deadly threats. In order to verify this, Zhang Changhao went to a convenience store he hadn't been to for a long time to try it out. Sure enough, the clerk was trembling with fear. So the frank thing is just nonsense. So in order to tease the male protagonist, Zhang Changhao first created a small accident, and then proposed the best welfare benefits ever to the other party. But the male protagonist had a poker face from beginning to end. This attitude even made Zhang Changhao feel that. Is he looking down on me? And Srank Hunter? However, for Zhang Changhao, who has been subjected to all kinds of gazes, the male protagonist's indifference makes him feel satisfied. So the reason he let the male protagonist take the blame was definitely not because he hated him. In fact, he was capable of solving Zhang Xiaoxin's problem. But he wanted to know what abilities the male protagonist had hidden, and how he would react to his threats. But what he didn't expect was that the male lead actually agreed to it. This was beyond Zhang Changhao's expectations, and he didn't know what to say for a moment. Zhang Changhao didn't see any fear on the other person's face. So why did he do this? Don't you want to conflict with yourself? By the way, the other party said that it is impossible to enter this level empty door now, but he didn't say that it was impossible before. Zhang Changhao has reason to suspect that the male protagonist is a high-level awakener who deliberately suppresses his magic power. But is it necessary to suppress magic power to this extent? This must be very uncomfortable. Although I really want to continue provoking each other, let's stop here for today. Let's get out of this damn place first. What he didn't know was that, despite the hero's steady appearance, he was actually very panicked inside, and yet he finally survived. In this way, the male protagonist was in front, Zhang Changhao supported Zhang Xiaoxing behind, and the three of them walked towards the copy exit, when the male protagonist returned to the outside again. Soon he was shocked by the scene in front of him, because not far away from him were densely packed with reporters. When they saw someone coming out alive, the waiting reporters became excited and the sounds of shutter clicks rang out. At the same time, reporters began to ask questions one after another. What is in the empty door? What's the monster level? Are there any other survivors? It was at this moment that the male protagonist realized that it was no wonder that there were so many people here. It turned out that all the exits were here. Before the male lead could get any information out of him, the reporter's eyes widened in disbelief. They saw Zhang Changhao carrying Zhang Xiaoxing out of an empty door. They didn't expect there were two levels, but why did Zhang Xiaoxing faint? At the same time, the staff of the association immediately stepped forward to inquire about the situation. Although there were many questions to ask, the first question was why Zhang Xiaoxing fainted. The staff thought that Zhang Xiaoxing was attacked by a secret device in an empty door. Who would have thought that Zhang Changhao actually looked at the male protagonist and said, "We just had a little friction when choosing the sacrifice," so he knocked Zhang Xiaoxing unconscious. The male protagonist looked at the other person speechlessly. He started lying as soon as he came out of the copy. The staff didn't believe this statement at all. After all, compared to a hunter who has never been heard of, it is obviously more likely that Zhang Changhao will take action. Although this was indeed the case, Zhang Changhao still felt very uncomfortable with the feeling of being suspected. The next moment, he stared at the male protagonist with his green eyes. "Don't just stand there, say something." The male protagonist was sweating profusely. He was silent for a while, then spoke expressionlessly. "I was the one who knocked Zhang Xiaoxing unconscious." When Yen, both the association staff and the reporters on the scene widened their eyes in shock. Although the male protagonist explained that he had no intention of harming the other party, and only let him fall asleep in order to pass the level smoothly, and he would apologize when he woke up, but no matter how you say it, this is unbelievable because hunters other than S-level cannot do this. However, at this moment, Zhang Changhao suddenly looked extremely weak. He looked at the association members breathlessly and asked, "How can I attack Zhang Xiaoxing in this state?" The staff of the 1 Yen Association fell into silence. Although Zhang Changhao lost a lot of blood in the empty door, the male protagonist remembered that he was not so seriously injured. It was estimated that this guy was pretending. At this time, the reporters present suddenly reacted. They rushed to the male protagonist and asked repeatedly if he really knocked out this level. The male protagonist replied with a cool face, "I did it." Looking at the report about the male protagonist in his hand, Zhang Xiaxing, who woke up in the hospital, couldn't help but clench his hands. How dare he do this to me? The man was obviously just a lowest level glass hunter, but he attracted the attention of the strongest glass hunters. Just now, and Runxing asked the male lead to have dinner together. Although the previous news was deleted and Runxing had seen it, he wanted to know if it was true that the male lead knocked out Zhang Xiaxing, and the male lead's reply surprised him. "Well, I guess so." As soon as he finished speaking, the male protagonist's cell phone rang. As soon as I picked up the phone, the food that had just tasted delicious suddenly lost its aroma, because the caller was the victim who was knocked unconscious. The male protagonist agreed and asked Runxing to eat first, while he went to the side to make a phone call, leaving Runxing alone. The purpose of Zhang Xiaxing's call was very simple. He wanted to know if it was really the male protagonist who knocked him out in Yaikangmen. Although the incident happened suddenly and he couldn't remember the whole process, he felt that Zhang Changhao must have done it, but he was not sure. Zhang Xiaxing said that he only remembered being hit on the back of the head. But the problem was that the last thing he saw was the male protagonist's cold gaze. So he now asked the male protagonist to explain the matter, and the male protagonist listened with cold sweat on his forehead. This is not good. Should he just confess that it was Zhang Changhao who threatened him to take the blame? But how can he trust Zhang Xiaxing? You should know that the reason why Zhang Xiaxing is called a national hero is not because he is a messenger of justice, but simply because he is far ahead in the number of goals he has scored. In the final analysis, he is just a hard worker who is only interested in dungeons. Would such a person protect a mere Frank? So the male protagonist admitted the incident and said, "I'm sorry, I knocked you out." The male protagonist then explained that he just didn't want to see him working too hard, and had originally planned to be a sacrifice himself as an apology, and give him the reward for clearing the copy. A simple sentence made Zhang Xiaxing's veins pop out. Are you fucking kidding me? This problem could have been solved through dialogue, but now they want to use a prop to solve it, which he cannot accept. No matter who it is, if someone is knocked unconscious in a cave that needs sacrifices, it is impossible for him to believe that it is for his own good. Moreover, Zhang Changhao and the male protagonist knew each other from the beginning, and Zhang Xiaxing suspected that the two were in the same group. Of course, the most important thing is, are you really an Frank Hunter? After hearing this, the male protagonist fell silent for a while. He wanted to say that he had a hidden story. However, Zhang Xiaxing no longer wanted to listen to his nonsense, and continuing would be a waste of time. Finally, Zhang Xiaxing looked out the window and said, "I will always keep an eye on you from now on." After saying that, she hung up the phone without waiting for the male protagonist to continue explaining. Then Zhang Xiaxing apologized to the assistant who had been waiting for a long time. The assistant laughed dryly and said it was okay. Then he handed over all the information the other party wanted. Although the news has been removed because the union took immediate action, he has already seen what he should have seen. A large number of people who disparaged Zhang Xiaxing appeared on the internet, and the assistant lady told him not to read these replies. But the stars are not that fragile yet. The problem now is that the whole world knows that S-level hunters are not invincible, and many people will be uneasy about this. The assistant guessed that the person who caused all this was Zhang Changhao. In addition, he also investigated the identity of the male protagonist, and he was really just in Flevel. Zhang Xiaxing also thought so at the beginning, but if this was true, Zhang Changhao had no reason to let him live. There is absolutely no need to threaten him to take the blame for yourself. Wouldn't it be simpler to just kill him? More importantly, the pair of eyes he saw when he fell had no human emotions at all. Since awakening, Zhang Xiaxing has never seen anyone who dares to be so serious. He had reason to suspect that the other party's level was fabricated, so he asked his assistant to contact the association and request a retest of the man's awakening value. The superpowers used by the awakened ones are collectively called skills. Every awakener will learn at least one skill the moment they awaken. But the magic on this planet has various restrictions. For example, The fire-attributed star cannot learn other types of magic even if one tries hard. There is only one way for them to use magic of other attributes. That is Chi Juzi buying the skill stone. But the male protagonist is different. He was reincarnated after learning various magics. Theoretically, as long as the conditions are met, all magic on Earth can be used. However, due to lung problems, the magic power in this body could not be integrated, and he could not display his talents. In order to solve this problem, he found a way to make magic amplifiers. But the empty door that produced the materials needed to produce the amplifiers was not so easy to enter, because it was in the hands of the Union Magic Tower with the most hunters. At this time, the male protagonist was standing outside the magic tower, and as soon as he appeared, he was driven away by the staff, because the male protagonist had been here yesterday, and people without an appointment cannot enter. However, at this moment, his younger brother and Runsheng suddenly appeared. It turned out that he asked Runsheng to help him make the reservation. As a famous instant hunter, it was much easier for Runsheng to apply. When the staff member who had just looked impatient saw Runsheng, his expression changed instantly because he happened to be a fan of Runsheng. The two began to communicate enthusiastically, and Runsheng said that he had already made an appointment with the Magic Tower representative through the Union. The male protagonist successfully entered the Magic Tower, and the staff also apologized for what had just happened. The two then came to the front desk to explain that they had made an appointment. The front desk had already been notified and told them that the representative was on the top floor, and then asked them to take the elevator up by themselves. When the elevator reached the 60th floor, the two were shocked by the scene in front of them. The male protagonist looked at the scene in front of him with a cold sweat on his face. What seemed to be wrong here? At the same time, at the top of the Magic Tower, there is a young lady with red hair. Looking forward to something? The woman was obviously one of the 3 strongest glass hunters, but she fell in love with the lowest glass hunter and almost drooled at him. The male protagonist, who had just entered the Magic Tower for the first time, felt something was wrong, because they clearly pressed the elevator button for the 60th floor, but they arrived at the 2nd floor. The male protagonist thought the elevator was broken, and then he heard Runsheng explain that it turned out to be a test from the Union leader. The representative of the Magic Tower is the Guild Master, who is one of the 3 strongest glass hunters at the moment and has a weird personality. Any visitor who wants to see him must pass the maze test. And the Magic Tower itself is a huge maze, so this time they can only rely on themselves to find the top floor. In this case, the male protagonist decided to take the stairs, but things were obviously not that simple. What appeared after the 2nd floor was actually an underground parking lot. It turned out that as long as the door was opened, it would be connected to an unknown space. They could only continue to go around in circles, so Jian Zhuang and the others had to go back to the 2nd floor first. At this time, the male protagonist asked how many people had passed the test, and Runsheng said with a cold sweat that he had never heard of any. Not only that, but I heard that except for a few senior executives, even the staff didn't know the passage. It was really fun to let Lake pass through such a complicated maze with nothing. But I have to say that this maze is really well made. The male protagonist is looking forward to meeting the tree tongue that made this maze, because this maze made with magic makes him feel a bit of the artistic conception of his hometown. The two came to the elevator door again, and Runsheng asked the male protagonist what to do, and the male protagonist told him not to worry. As he said that, he put his hand on the elevator door to feel it carefully. Even though this body is useless now, there are still things I can do. This magic structure was unexpectedly simple. After finding the way to the top floor, and Runsheng's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? How do I get there? The hero gave her an answer with practical actions. She first pressed the elevator button, and then pressed the button for the top floor from outside. Finally, he stepped out and waited for the elevator door to close, then signaled Runsheng to step back. The next moment, the male protagonist took a few steps back, and then kicked the elevator door in front of Runsheng's shocked eyes. With such a huge force, the elevator door was kicked down directly. An empty space appeared, and Runsheng watched this scene with a cold sweat on his face. Not understanding why the male protagonist suddenly did this, the male protagonist said calmly, "Let's go." The bottom was connected to an empty door above. As soon as the voice fell, the male protagonist jumped down without hesitation. When he stepped on the ground again, already arrived in another space. Of course, and Runsheng also followed. But this feeling was more exciting than jumping off a cliff in an empty door. Just at this moment, a voice suddenly came from not far away from them. "I didn't expect you to find this place." Then a super beautiful red-haired girl turned around and said, "You are the two people who have cleared my maze the fastest in history." At this time, Runxing was already immersed in the other person's beauty. But the male protagonist still had a dead look on his face. The other party stood up and said, "I didn't expect you to find the hidden passage, but your luck ends here, because from now on you have to face me." The Moto Archery Club represented Esther in the competition. Next, Esther asked the two to sit down first, and then asked Runxing to introduce the male lead. He was very interested in the male protagonist, because it was impossible to find the passage to his maze with ordinary analytical skills, but the male protagonist solved it so easily. At the same time, the male protagonist also realized that this was the person who designed the maze, and he really had a special personality, just as the rumors said. He then introduced himself. Esther smiled at the male protagonist and said, "I like people with strength, as people who also have rare attributes. Let's get along well." However, as an alien who had just traveled through time, the male protagonist couldn't understand what the other party was saying. What does the same rare attribute mean? It turns out that Esther mistakenly thought that the male protagonist was someone who had awakened the analytical skill, and such people were quite rare at the same time, and Runxing explained to the male protagonist that Esther was a cursed hunter, one of the few in the world. It was then that the male protagonist remembered that he seemed to have seen that the other party was an awakened person who used various abnormal states to kill monsters. Magic has just appeared in this world, and there are few people who can use complex spells. Most people like Zheng Xiaxin and Jiang Changhao simply use violence. Even defense recovery types like Runxing are rare. However, there are very few people who can identify special abilities such as curses and brainwashing. Thinking of this, the male protagonist began to talk nonsense. "Sorry, I didn't recognize you. Am not well informed." Wanyan Esther couldn't help but smile silently. "An appraiser as talented as you must be fully commissioned. I've been participating in TV shows recently." After the small talk, we got down to business. Esther asked Runxing if he wanted to enter their Yaikongmen, and Runxing, who was suddenly called, quickly returned to the room. However, it was not him but the male protagonist who actually entered. The male protagonist then explained that Runxing only made an appointment for himself because his level was too low. The people of Mota ignored him. As he said this, he took out his ID, and Esther was a little surprised. Glass. But he wasn't too surprised. This is pretty much the case with appraisers, although this is the lowest among appraisers. In addition, Esther was curious about why the male protagonist entered the empty door. It would be difficult for him to collect the things inside, because the material on that tree wasn't enough even for him. The classical Chinese hero solemnly stated that he would never touch the trees. But even so, Esther couldn't just agree to let the male protagonist go in, because he thought the male protagonist was a member of the New Sisters Union like in Runxing. After all, it takes a lot of money to monopolize an empty door, and he is not doing charity. If you really want to get in, you shouldn't come here on your own, but let the union talk to each other. So he reminded the male protagonist not to try to take advantage. "I hate haggling. Remember to remind your guild." The male protagonist felt that the other party was showing off. It was just a ground-level copy. They probably don't even recognize a quarter of the good resources out there. But his next words made Esther stunned. "Sorry, I don't have a union." At the same time, Runxing stood up to testify for the male protagonist. "Yes, let alone the union, the eldest brother doesn't even have his own team, he is a loner." And the male protagonist also spoke. "Although you keep calling me an appraiser, I have never done this kind of work. I only know Runxing in this circle." And this simple sentence almost moved Runxing to tears. The male protagonist said that this was just his personal commission and no union would benefit from it. As he spoke, he wanted to give his own conditions. After all, he had never thought of entering someone else's empty door for free. However, before he could finish, Esther suddenly interrupted him. "Wait, what do you mean?" Esther, who had just looked like a giant 1,000 miles away, was so excited that his hair was flying. He looked at the male protagonist with a pout, like a hunter seeing the most delicious prey, and the male protagonist was sweating coldly. "What's going on?" I haven't mentioned any conditions that would make you drool. The woman offered a whopping 500 million yuan in signing bonus just to hire the man in front of her to work 4 days a week and 3 days a week. Who would have thought that this guy who could barely afford a meal would choose to refuse? Just because she heard that the male protagonist had not joined any union, Esther, who had a hurtful face just now, clapped her ears instantly. Why didn't you tell me such an important thing earlier? Come to Mota and I will hire you right away. That empty door means nothing. I'll give it to you just by coming. The classical Chinese hero seemed unmoved on the surface, but he was actually very excited in his heart. Oh shit, pie really fell from the sky. And Runxing explained to the hero that large unions had a large amount of grinding stones and equipment in circulation, and they were in urgent need of people with the ability to identify them. After hearing this, the male protagonist understood. Humans on Earth cannot judge the purity of grinding stone with the naked eye. If you don't want to be cheated, it is best to bring an appraiser with you when making a transaction. While the male protagonist was thinking, Esther suddenly stretched out a hand and opened her mouth. The signing fee is 500 million. The male protagonist was shocked by the other party's generosity and couldn't help but speak out. What did you say? And Esther thought the new sisterhood would offer a higher price. For a moment, I wanted to roar to the sky. They had already snatched and Runxing away. So why would they want to snatch the hunter I valued? Seeing that Runxing was sweating, he advised him to calm down. The male protagonist was thinking how many rice bowls he could eat if he had 500 million. Esther calmed down and gathered her hair, then said that they had hired many excellent appraisers, so the work intensity was not very high. Even though he had heard it clearly, the male protagonist still wanted to confirm. Do you really want me to be the appraiser? Spend 500 million. Esther felt there was hope and was delighted. Of course, the male protagonist was really tempted at this moment. He didn't need to explore the empty door, but could make a fortune by identifying equipment. He wanted to agree immediately. Then Esther happily said that the analysis department had a flexible working system and only needed to work 4 days a week. It was this sentence that directly shattered the hero's fantasy, because the word go to work deeply touched his sensitive nerves. I was reborn for retirement. Now you want me to stamp the contract myself and run back to the company to work. If I go to work, I have to work overtime, report to my boss, and accept complaints from ordinary people. Just thinking about it gives the male protagonist a headache. No, I absolutely don't want to go to work at this time. Esther has already taken out the highest paying contract. Even the top hunter in Runxing was surprised when he saw it. Seeing this, Esther struck while the iron was hot. And Runxing, if you change your mind, we welcome you anytime. But he didn't notice that the male lead had already lowered his head in frustration. Then the male protagonist's deep voice was heard. Sorry, I'll just pretend I didn't hear your suggestion just now. Wenyan Esther was shocked. How much money do you want? The male protagonist explained that it was not about money at all. He just didn't want to join any union. Esther looked him in the eyes, confirmed that this was his true thought, and then his expression changed in a second. Really? Since you have decided this, it doesn't matter. If you reject my proposal, you will need a lot of money to enter the empty door. The male protagonist definitely cannot come up with this amount of money. But fortunately, he was well prepared. I want to make a deal with you. The male protagonist stood up and said, I know a magical substance. If you mix this thing into cement and metal to build a building, it will be immune to any skills to a certain extent, and it can absorb magic power, so it will not fall even if attacked by monsters. He went to the window and continued, the entire magic tower is wrapped in a barrier, and the maintenance cost must be very high. The male protagonist thought that this was enough as the entrance fee, and Esther listened boredly. Then he said coldly, this is of course enough, but only on the premise that the thing is really useful. The male protagonist directly took out a bag of sand from his body. You can have as much of this as you want. Only I know the location. And Runxing recognized at a glance that it was the thing the male protagonist had used to deal with the fire bats. But does this sand also have the effect of absorbing magic power? Although it's a bit uneconomical to use this as a condition, people often come and go in that place, and they will be discovered sooner or later. It's better to do a favor. Esther picked up the sand and looked at it, wondering if this thing really has this effect. Then he looked at the male protagonist and asked, you used such valuable information to exchange for access to the garbage one empty gate. Could it be that you have made this deal with someone else? The male protagonist of the classical Chinese novel was speechless. He just said that his empty door was very valuable. Now let's talk about the garbage empty door and language. The male protagonist asked if he needed to promise not to tell anyone else. Esther was curious. Isn't this a disadvantage for you? While the two were discussing, Esther's assistant brought coffee to the group. As for the previous question, the male protagonist said that we should just regard it as a mutual benefit between our rare attributes. In a blink of an eye, the male protagonist and the other person had left, and Esther was drinking coffee as usual. However, the assistant felt that the representative seemed a little unhappy, so he asked. Esther said it was not a big deal, he just played a joke on the guest. This scared the assistant. Did he cast a curse on the guest just now? Thinking of this, the assistant instantly turned into a mother, saying, "You said you wouldn't do such a thing." Esther looked indifferent, saying it wasn't a terrible curse. The assistant asked what it was this time, and Esther happily said she would sneeze for 30 seconds. 1 Yen assistant felt really bored, but he didn't hear anyone sneeze. That's right, when he used his skill just now, the man should have sneezed. But he suddenly looked up at him. At that moment, his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Even Esther was frightened by the other party. He must have discovered it. It was obvious that even Lasky couldn't escape his own curse, and no one knew where that monster came from. Just as Esther was complaining, the identification results of the sand left by the male protagonist came out. It really has a magic absorbing effect. This kind of thing was given so readily that the assistants guessed that the male protagonist wanted to leave a good impression on the representative. But Esther thought this was even more terrifying. Then he asked his assistant to bring the male lead's resume. He wanted to see what the man was planning. The scene turned to the other side, and the male protagonist, who was as steady as an old dog just now, was lying on the corner of the street and vomiting. But it was not because of the curse, but because of the cup of coffee he drank before. He heard that it was a drink prepared for distinguished guests, so he took a sip without any preparation, and then he almost spit it out on the spot, because this was exactly the smell of Alpha Physics industrial adhesive. What was it called for distinguished guests, but they gave this kind of thing? Then the two of them looked into each other's eyes. Just then, Esther cast the curse. The result is that the male protagonist wants to vomit but dares not to because he is afraid of being discovered as an alien, while Esther mistakenly thinks that the other person's eyes are full of murderous intent. Little did he know that the protagonist's body was now controlled by Xiao Lu through magic. Unless that person's magic was more powerful than his, an alien, he would not be able to take away control of this body by any means. Even if it was a curse from him sucking hunters, it was the same. The male protagonist, who had recovered, tremblingly bought a bottle of mineral water to rinse his mouth, while Enrunching asked about the thing the male protagonist had just given to Esther. He had never heard of this substance, which could not only extinguish flames and bat flames instantly, but also make buildings stronger. The value of this thing is obvious, but the male protagonist did not hand it over to the association but gave it to Mota, and Runching wondered if the male protagonist hated the association. But the male protagonist said no, and he had no feelings for the association. He then explained that he was just trying to make a good impression on Esther. It was a simple sentence, but Enrunching was shocked after hearing it. He suspected that Esther was the type that the male protagonist liked. But unfortunately the male protagonist said that he had no feelings for Esther. Oh, so that's it, and Runching was embarrassed after guessing wrong twice in a row. So what are you looking for in that empty door that you would go to such lengths? For the first time, the man was thankful that he was a smoker, because people with respiratory problems could not detect magic. Just now, the male protagonist, who was aching all over, stretched himself, and the first thing he did was to see if the things next to him were dried. This is the material needed to make the magic power amplifier that he and Enrunching entered into a trading door with Esther yesterday, the wings of fairy monsters. I thought it was difficult to get it, but thanks to Enrunching's help, now that the most difficult material had been obtained, the rest would be much easier. He had taken another big step towards regaining his previous strength. But let's put these aside for now. There are more important things to do. That's to fill your stomach. However, just when he was struggling with what to eat today, suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The male protagonist was very confused. What happened? Who is coming? Could it be this Bodis family? It would be very troublesome if it was an acquaintance of the original body. Then the male protagonist opened the door with trepidation and saw a beautiful woman and two big men. And the girl among them was an old acquaintance of his, Shen Yu Yen from the Hunter Association. The hero was curious about what they wanted from him, and then he found out from Shen Yu Yen. Someone reported him for forging his awakening level, and now he needs to go to the Hunter Association for investigation. Hearing this, the male protagonist was shocked. What did you say? At this time, the two big men were already gearing up for a fight. If you don't want to be arrested, you'd better behave yourself. The male protagonist looked at them with a cold sweat on his face. It seemed that he couldn't finish this meal. Soon, they got on the car back to the association. Shen Yu Yen was sitting alone in the front row, browsing on her phone, while the male lead was sandwiched between two big men, not daring to move. In fact, Shen Yu Yen had long doubted the male protagonist's level. After all, how could a mere class possibly defeat the Facchino killer? As for what the other party said about being killed by luck, Shen Yu Yen was a little unlucky. However, after checking the information, he became even more confused. It's really Flevel. Moreover, the opponent only had one record of entering an empty gate. His record as a hunter was too simple. A guy who only entered an empty Frank gate once killed a crank monster in one go. This is ridiculous no matter how you think about it. It would be very dangerous if the other party really concealed the awakening level. People like this usually do things secretly, but Shen Yu Yen has no right to continue investigating the male protagonist. So he reported it directly to his superiors. The matter would have just passed like this. No one at the higher-ups took the report seriously. But a few days ago, things took an unexpected turn, because Zhang Xiaxin, who left the empty door in a coma, also reported the male protagonist. Unlike Shen Yu Yen, who is just a small civil servant, Zhang Xiaxin is a national hero. After receiving the reinspection notice, Shen Yu Yen originally thought that the male protagonist would resist, but unexpectedly, he followed her obediently, and the house he just built was both dilapidated and old. It really doesn't seem like a place where a high-level hunter should live. Could it be that he hid all the money? Just as Shen Yu Yen was deep in thought, the male protagonist, who had already changed his clothes, suddenly interrupted. He wanted to know how much it would cost to retest the awakening value. He can hardly afford to eat. When Shen Yu Yen explained that the inspection fee is 480,000 yuan, however, since it is a retest, if the data has not changed, it is free. If the data is falsified, not only will the inspection fee be borne, but also a fine will be paid. The male protagonist was originally very worried about his situation. But I felt relieved when I saw other people's results. If this kind of thing is used for testing, it is impossible for people with respiratory problems to detect their magic power. The male protagonist instantly felt stable. Fortunately, the original body was a smoker and his lungs had been damaged long ago. There's no way that kind of equipment could detect anything. However, he was happy for only a few seconds before he felt like a bucket of cold water was poured on him. This was because Shen Yu Yen actually told him that there was a new device. It turned out that the association had already discovered that the accuracy of the test was reduced when examining patients with lung diseases, and had already issued a notice. But the male protagonist definitely doesn't know that. Soon they came to a high-tech device. At this time, Shen Yu Yen reminded the male protagonist that you still have one chance to actively correct your level. The classical Chinese male protagonist hurriedly explained whether there was any misunderstanding. However, at this time, no matter how hard he struggled, it was useless. In the end, the male protagonist was pressed down on the cold iron bed while screaming. Soon the test results came out. The male protagonist sat on the bed nervously waiting for the verdict. Before the announcement, Shen Yu Yen kindly reminded the male protagonist, "Do you know what the punishment is for falsely reporting your level?" The male protagonist listened with cold sweat on his face. He doesn't know. Is the terrifying magic of this body about to be discovered? How would he explain it then? Would he have to confess that he was an alien? Of course, compared to this, what's more important is the inspection fee of 480,000 yuan. How could he possibly take it out? Just when the male protagonist was struggling, Shen Yu Yen has seen the results. Awakening 14 F level. You are not suspicious, it is only 2 points higher than last year. This is normal. Shen Yu Yen told the male protagonist not to worry. The male protagonist finally got what he wished and didn't have to pay the fine. But he was not happy at all, so this body was really only F grade. He originally thought that he could not solve the problem of the magician's lungs. It turns out that this body has no magic power at all. No wonder the golem in Yaikungmen only attacked in Runsheng and was unaware of his existence. It turned out that they didn't even consider him as an intruder. Thinking of this, the male protagonist laughed at himself twice, which made Shen Yu Yen wonder if he had mental problems. Little did he know that the hero's mind was currently occupied with only one thing, that is, his reincarnation magic had failed. Also, from now on, he will live as the weakest magician on Earth. The hero left the association in despair, but fortunately his suspicion was completely cleared. Shen Yu Yen is responsible for sending the male protagonist out. Looking at the male protagonist's condition, he asked worriedly if he really didn't need to go to the hospital. You should know that lower-level awakeners often experience side effects after examination, so if you feel uncomfortable, it is best to go and see a doctor. However, the male protagonist said no, and thanked the other party for his kindness, but he was still almost moved to tears. This earthling is actually worried about him. Shen Yu Yen was explaining that this ability is very suitable for tracking criminals, but was suddenly interrupted by the male protagonist. Then the two of them stared at their feet with wide eyes in shock, and saw a figure lying in a pool of blood not far away. At this moment, the girl was touched by a person's kindness for the first time, but she didn't know that the other person was an alien. Shen Yu Yen, who was just walking side by side with the male protagonist, was startled because a fruit thief who was hit by a car suddenly appeared in front of them. After she recovered, she didn't plan to do anything. As she had seen this many times, however, the male protagonist's performance shocked her, as he actually picked up the civet cat's body. Seeing this, Shen Yu Yen reminded the male protagonist that this thing had been dead for some time and it would be dirty to touch it directly. However, the male protagonist held it tightly in his arms and told him to just wash it if it got dirty. The male protagonist then stood up and said goodbye to Shen Yu Yen. Shen Yu Yen looked at the male lead in disbelief and said yes stumblingly. Be careful. She thought the male protagonist wanted to bury the civet cat, but she never expected that she would have such a kind side. Looking at the other person's back as he left, he was left with an indelible impression of this man. Little did he know that in a place where he couldn't see, the hero was almost fainted with happiness. It was like pie in the sky that he actually picked up such a good biological specimen. It turns out that there are two types of golems on the protagonist's planet. One is a weapon golem assembled from rocks and metals, and the other is an organic golem made from animal corpses. The simple explanation is that the male protagonist got an experimental subject. So the hero went home and started experimenting. But for some reason, the mixing went very poorly. After all, she didn't have any decent props, and it was difficult to control the temperature, humidity, and concentration. Just when the male protagonist had a headache, her cell phone suddenly rang. The male protagonist picked it up impatiently and looked at it, wondering who would call her at 10 o'clock in the evening. It was all her fault that she had a sudden realization and added an identification tag to her introduction after returning from Mota. But she didn't expect that this would be public information. Since then, I have been receiving recruitment calls. The male protagonist was tired of answering the call, so he hung up directly. She was so tired that she didn't even bother to respond. Suddenly her phone vibrated again, and the male protagonist picked it up and took a look. What was this? Then I saw a chocolate ad pop up, and it said meet you at the convenience store. The male protagonist, who had never seen these things, thought they were specially for her. So she walked towards the convenience store alone in the middle of the night. Although she felt extremely sleepy, she thought that it was specially prepared for her and it would be too rude not to take a look. But before she walked far, she found that she was blocked by a van in front. The male protagonist walked forward to check, and didn't understand why someone parked the car here. It was really rude. But he didn't notice that there were two people in the car staring at her with ill intentions. Then, just as the male protagonist turned around and prepared to find another way, a man suddenly rushed down from the car, followed by a sneak attack. The sudden accident left the male protagonist very puzzled. Although she struggled hard, she couldn't get free. His consciousness gradually fell into coma, and he didn't know how long he was unconscious. When he woke up, he was tied up and his eyes were covered with black cloth. He didn't know what was going on. At this moment, she just felt that the earth was a terrible place. I was kidnapped not long after I arrived. At this moment, a conversation suddenly came into the male protagonist's ears. Is this guy the Flevel? Yes, we found a chance to capture him. Through their conversation, the male protagonist can analyze that this was not an accident, but a premeditated one. As the two continued to chat, their big brother is here. The eldest brother asked the two to bow as soon as they came up, because they were VIP customers. Then he asked his younger brothers to check the goods. The customer wants to see it later, and then the male protagonist is shocked to realize that he is actually a commodity. Originally, the male protagonist was another person's commodity, but when the VIP client saw the male protagonist, he slowly curled his lips. Then he reminded several people that the tied guy seemed to wake up. The male protagonist, who hadn't moved at all, didn't understand why he was exposed. But before he could figure it out, the other party stepped forward and tore off the black cloth covering the male protagonist's eyes. Then a familiar figure appeared in front of the male protagonist. It was the Slevel hunter Jiang Chonghao. Jiang Chonghao spoke with interest. Long time no see. It seems that the male protagonist hasn't figured out the situation yet. Jiang Chonghao kindly explained to him. It turns out that he has become very famous in the circle recently because he solved the Mota maze. But the hunter level of this senior appraiser is F level. Therefore, the male protagonist, who has such weak combat power but such high identification skills, naturally became the target of the criminals, and the fate of the male protagonist is also easy to guess. That is, he was sold to a rich man as a private appraiser. After all, many people don't want others to know what high-end equipment they have, and the appraiser's fees are generally very high. But as a slave, the maintenance cost is much cheaper, and people below the prefecture level are easily brainwashed, so it is very convenient to use. Jiang Chonghao said that he had done this before, so he became a VIP guest here. After explaining, Jiang Chonghao walked past the male protagonist mercilessly. The male protagonist hurriedly asked the other party if he was willing to help. However, Jiang Chonghao said that he was a guest and had other things to do, so he waved goodbye. Looking at the arrogant kidnapper in front of him, the male protagonist felt regretful. He should not have been reincarnated into this damn world in the first place. Soon, the male protagonist was thrown into a room on the second floor and locked up, leaving room for the next batch of goods. At this time, one of them reminded that the guy had not been given eye bags, and the other said it didn't matter, he must have fallen asleep anyway. After that, the door slowly closed, but the man who should have been asleep in their eyes opened his eyes. The male protagonist doesn't understand why they left him here alone. Aren't they planning to sell him out right away? Just as he was lost in thought, suddenly a faint floral scent wafted into his nose. Following the direction of the fragrance, I saw a special magic item quietly placed on the table. This is a prop that makes people fall asleep. Even Blevel awakeners are not immune to it. However, it is useless to the male protagonist, a great magician. Of course, this is not important. The important thing is to escape from here first. The male protagonist struggled to untie his shoelaces, bit one end and stepped on the other, and then began to rub the bandages that bound his hands frantically. Finally, his hard work paid off and he successfully freed his hands. The first thing the man did next was to call the police. After all, even if you are immune to brainwashing, being sold is still very dangerous. But after searching for a long time, he found that there was no cell phone. It was normal to think about it. How could the kidnappers make such a mistake? At this moment, the male protagonist couldn't help but look at the magic item that could make people unconscious, then stepped forward and picked it up. If you want to escape, this is the only thing you can use. The man just said, "Have you ever seen me run?" Because of his leg disease, who would have thought that he could successfully scare and Slevel hunter? Not long ago, the unfortunate male protagonist was kidnapped, and the kidnappers locked him in a room with a hypnotic magic prop. At this time, two young men were guarding outside a passage. They were doing nothing, but suddenly they felt something. I looked back suddenly, and saw a golden light rising behind me, and at the same time a fragrance wafting out. Seeing the collision, the two men hurriedly covered their mouths and noses and prepared for battle. But before they could figure out what was happening, suddenly something like a meteor hammer hit one of them in the face. At this time, the other person finally realized something. But it was too late. A strong sleepiness swept over his whole body. Then the male protagonist walked out of the door carrying the magic prop. I have to say that this thing is quite useful. Afraid of being discovered, the male protagonist prepared to find an exit immediately, and just at this moment, his foot suddenly kicked something. I bent down and saw that it was a cell phone. I was so lucky. The male protagonist immediately pressed the emergency call number to call the police. Soon the call was connected and a voice came from the other end, asking what happened. The male protagonist immediately said that he was kidnapped and asked for rescue. However, the person on the other end seemed to hear nothing and kept asking him to speak louder. But no matter how much the male protagonist raises his voice, it's the same. This made the male protagonist wonder if the phone was broken. Since the phone call doesn't work, texting should work. The text message was sent successfully, but the reply was very mechanical. Received. May take some time to arrive. In case of emergency, please dial 112. I sent another message and got the same result, which made the male protagonist a little uneasy. Did the other party receive my message? Just in case, he sent another text message to Enrunsheng, and then picked up the magic props to start his escape journey. At this time, there were 2 other human traffickers patrolling on this floor, but they suddenly found something wrong. Why was there fog ahead? At the same time, a yellow-haired man walked out. Who is this? Are there any guys with dyed hair among them? But the male protagonist didn't wait for them to figure it out, and he once again turned the magic item like a meteor hammer, and then swung it towards one of them. The next second, the man was slapped in the face. The accuracy was really good. Only then did the other person realize that this guy was the awakened person they had kidnapped. However, it was too late. The male protagonist took back the magic tool through the chain and pressed it directly on the other party's face. Another double kill achievement was achieved. The magic item was really useful for hitting the face. The next step is to find an exit and escape as quickly as possible. But it's a bit difficult in this building where even the windows are blocked. And at this moment, the male protagonist was suddenly startled because he felt a huge magical power coming from behind him. This feels like an empty door, considering that an empty door is usually on a mountain or in an open space outdoors. The male protagonist decides to use it as a signpost to escape. But before he could make any move, a group of people appeared behind him, and it seemed that his escape was exposed. The male protagonist hurriedly ran down the stairs to the next floor. Unexpectedly, at this critical moment, his legs suddenly began to cramp violently. This made the male protagonist break out in a cold sweat. Damn it, he hasn't even started running yet. In just a moment, the people behind him had caught up with him. They pointed at the male protagonist angrily, saying that a mere flevel dared to run away. He was really looking for death. However, when they saw clearly what was in the male protagonist's hand, they all showed expressions of horror. They hurriedly held their breath, and the male protagonist said that it was too late to realize it now, and then he threw the magic item like a meteor hammer again. But this time the hero miscalculated, as one of the men was of a higher level and took it with one hand. Then he rushed towards the male protagonist and pressed him against the wall with one hand. At this point, he no longer cared about the rule that he couldn't touch the goods and was determined to teach the male protagonist a lesson. Who would have thought that the male protagonist would grab the other person's arm and then hit the other person's chin hard with his knee? The man's eyes rolled back on the spot, and then he fell straight back to the ground. Looking at the guy who was knocked unconscious and other guys who were knocked unconscious, the male protagonist couldn't help but sigh, "I'm so fucking tired." After resting for a while, the male protagonist picked up the magic prop from the ground, and then found that the situation was not good, because the magic prop itself had run out of magic power, and it would be troublesome if it was caught up again. At this time, the male protagonist suddenly found a door behind him, and the huge magic power came from behind the door. There is an empty door behind this door, which must be the exit. The male protagonist, who finally saw hope, threw away the useless magic props and walked towards the door tremblingly. Fortunately, the door was not locked. He pushed it open with excitement, but the scene in front of him stunned him. Zhang Chonghao and a group of people appeared in front of him. What happened? How could there be an empty door indoors? And with Zhang Chonghao involved, it was all over. The boss was very angry when he saw the merchandise running away. He scolded his subordinates for how they managed the place. The subordinates asked the protagonist why he was here and what he had done to the people above him. Could he have solved the problem by himself? Did you lie about your level? Seeing that the other party didn't notice that he had knocked those people out with magic props, the male protagonist was ready to bluff and escape. But unfortunately, with Zhang Changhao present, it was doomed to fail. What's worse is that the boss of the human trafficking gang shamelessly asked Zhang Changhao for help. The male protagonist just wanted to despise him, thinking that he would help you if he actually used VA products. Who would have thought that Zhang Changhao would just grin and project like this? As a thank you, the boss said that he could sell the male lead to Zhang Changhao at a low price. And then Zhang Changhao walked up to the male lead and said, "Did you hear that? He said he sold you at a low price. What should I do? Are you gonna run away now? There's a road behind me. If you try your best to escape, I'll let you go." However, the protagonist's next words made the other party stunned. Zhang Changhao. When Zhang Changhao looked at the other party seriously. Not once. This is the most miserable space awakener, who was in danger within 30 seconds of his appearance. Just now, the male protagonist's words, "Have you ever seen me run?" shocked Zhang Changhao reacted and looked at the other party with a fighting spirit. "Then let's fight here." Who would have thought that the male protagonist would just raise his hands and surrender? "No, I don't think we need to fight here." Zhang Changhao looked down at the male protagonist, who had knocked out everyone above and walked here. "How do you want me to believe your surrender?" The other party's concerns were not wrong. If it were the male protagonist, he would not easily believe it. Just as the male protagonist was thinking about what to do next, he suddenly felt a magical power coming. He and Zhang Changhao turned their heads to look to the side at the same time, and saw a man walking out of a space channel. At first the male protagonist thought it was the Econ Gate, but after thinking about it, he realized that it was not the Econ Gate but a magic channel, a space movement skill. The newcomers came forward to greet their boss, and Zhang Changhao came forward to ask, "Is this the porter?" The boss proudly introduced Zhang Changhao, saying that he had the ability to move people through space, and was a rare sorcerer. Zhang Changhao grinned, not expecting to see the real person. The same boss also introduced Zhang Changhao to the porter. They were chatting happily, and the male protagonist, who was suddenly ignored, wanted to take this opportunity to escape. Who would have thought that Zhang Changhao would suddenly explode with anger, and taking advantage of the opportunity when the porter was about to shake hands with him, he punched the porter hard on the neck with all his strength, sending him flying. The sudden scene shocked the male protagonist, and the boss of the human trafficking organization questioned Zhang Changhao with an ugly face what he was doing. However, Zhang Changhao, who was very enthusiastic just now looked at the few people like ants. It turns out that his goal all along was to kill this guy, and he even spent a lot of time gaining the trust of these people for this purpose. After all, space awakeners are too slippery. They will run away at the slightest sign of trouble. So it is difficult to find an opportunity. As the saying goes, if you want to do something, you should put yourself in the game. Shang added half a piece, and Zhang Changhao won this round. The male protagonist looked at this scene with confusion, not understanding what was going on. In fact, Zhang Changhao didn't care whether these guys were smuggling or illegally occupying the Yikong men. But it was another matter for these people to smuggle the awakened overseas. The younger brother, realizing that something was wrong, reminded the boss to escape quickly through the Yikong men. But what responded to him was Zhang Changhao's ruthless punch. The male protagonist watched calmly from the side. And indeed no one could stop this guy. Rank is not given for nothing. At first, the Hunter Association only set the rank from F to A. But suddenly one day, hunters with far superior and terrifying power appeared one after another, and this superstandard rank was finally set as rank. There is no doubt that they are at the top of the food chain on Earth. In the blink of an eye, the boss was the only one still awake in the original trafficking organization. He trembled and begged Zhang Changhao to let him go, but Zhang Changhao was not a kind man. How could he agree to such a ridiculous request? Listening to the screams coming from the side, the male protagonist realized again that he shouldn't have contradicted this guy. Just then, the male protagonist and Zhang Changhao were suddenly startled because of the sound of sirens coming from outside. "Police!" Zhang Changhao looked at the male protagonist in panic and said, "You called the police?" The male protagonist suddenly remembered that this was the case, so he nodded in acknowledgement. When Zhang Changhao had an expression of disbelief, as if he had seen something incredible. "You actually called the police for something that happened in society." But the male protagonist didn't understand what the problem was. Zhang Chonghao soon calmed down. He explained that he was here just to stop these guys from selling the awakened ones abroad, and reminded the male protagonist not to get involved with this organization. The classical male protagonist said that this is what the police should do. When Zhang Chonghao heard the word police, he was very dissatisfied. You don't know how slow these guys are usually. Normally, even if you call the police, it will take at least a few days to find the place. I don't know why it happened so quickly this time. Zhang Chonghao thought that the male protagonist had done something in advance. Although he was very curious, now was not the time to say more. He patted the male protagonist on the shoulder, then pushed the door and left without looking back. Seeing this, the male protagonist was shocked and asked him to wait a moment, but Zhang Chonghao seemed to have heard nothing, and the male protagonist cursed him inwardly. In this situation, how could he explain it to the police alone? Soon a large number of police rushed in, and then they took the male protagonist as the first suspect and detained him on the spot, and then warned him not to use his ability, and asked where the hostages were. Although the male protagonist explained that he was the reporter, they didn't believe him at all, and the male protagonist was speechless. Is it really okay to treat kind aliens like this? At this critical moment, an angelic voice suddenly came into the male protagonist's ears. Wait, I saw the panting Miss Shen Yu Yen ran in. Looking at the arrested male protagonist, Shen Yu Yen came forward to prove it was indeed she who called the police. This time the police believed her without any doubt. She uncuffed the male protagonist and apologized. The male protagonist just wanted to yell, "Didn't I tell you that?" However, the male protagonist was very curious about why Shen Yu Yen was here, and Shen Yu Yen raised her phone to show him. It turned out that An Runxing received the male protagonist's text message for help, but she was on her way to suppress the riot in the copy and had no time to spare. So she handed the matter over to Shen Yu Yen. Then Shen Yu Yen found this place through her tracking skills. No wonder the police came so quickly. Just as Shen Yu Yen was explaining, a loud shout suddenly came from the side. It turned out that the police discovered through comparison that these people were wanted human traffickers, the organization that trafficked awakened people overseas and was in the limelight recently. This seemed to be their street venue. Shen Yu Yen was shocked when she heard this. What? She had heard of this organization, which was very difficult to track, and now seemed to be almost wiped out. At this time, the police captain came forward and asked the male protagonist, "Did you do all this?" The male protagonist denied it outright, saying, "It was not me, it was all done by that madman Zhang Chonghao." The captain looked miserable when he heard this. "There are so many people lying on it. Wasn't it you who did this?" The male protagonist was in a cold sweat, thinking, "I did that." The captain asked the male protagonist to explain himself clearly, and the male protagonist had no choice but to tell the truth. He looked cold and arrogant. "In fact, I did all this to protect myself." At this time, another policeman picked up the magic prop that the male protagonist threw away and asked if it belonged to the male protagonist, while Shen Yu Yen fell into deep thought. Having said that, this guy was not tied up and appeared in the reporting room. Moreover, he was the one who reported the case. Looking at the other party's body without any wounds, he still maintained a detached attitude even though he was almost sold overseas. Shen Yu Yen couldn't help but wonder, was he really kidnapped? Was all of this part of his plan from the beginning to the end? The man finally used his first magic since arriving on Earth, and the first thing he did was to heal his lame leg. The human trafficking incident was over, and the male protagonist, who was a hostage, successfully sent the entire organization in. At the same time, he also gained a lot of money and got a Blevel hypnotic magic item for free. The reason was that the police did not know the effect of this thing and mistook the man for its owner. This type of magic item is very rare and can be charged for use, which makes the male protagonist very satisfied. Although he had to deal with the police's interrogation alone because of Zhang Changhao's escape, it was all worth it. The only regret is that this thing can only be used on humans and has no effect on animals and monsters. At this moment, with a sound, the man looked back excitedly and saw green steam coming out of the kettle. He hurried over to turn off the gas stove, and then poured the boiling water directly into the cup with excitement. It worked. It's the perfect color. He admired his work carefully. He never thought that he could make this on this remote planet. I am indeed a rare genius. It turns out that this green thing is a magic booster. Just drinking it will temporarily increase your magic power. Just like the flint of a lighter, it can provide the initial energy. The male protagonist picked up the cup and drank it all, then carefully felt the changes in his body. Very good. Breathing is very smooth. Although the effect of this potion can only last for 5 minutes, it is enough to complete a magic test. Then the male protagonist used the first magic after coming to Earth. He first restored the muscles in his right leg, and then cast a spell to keep his body healthy and continue to age. When the magic was over, the hero jumped up and down excitedly. It really didn't hurt at all. But it's too early to be happy because he has just confirmed one thing, that is, the magic power of this body is really rubbish. He used up all his magic power just by using low-level magic. The magic power conversion efficiency of this body is too low, so amplifiers cannot be used frequently. But think on the bright side, at least it worked this time, right? When something happy happens, people feel refreshed and should eat something to celebrate. The male protagonist was just about to see what was left in the refrigerator when he suddenly heard a knock on the door. He thought it was Shen Yu Yen again. But who would have thought that when he opened the door he saw it was an old man? Through his original memory, the male protagonist recalled that this was the landlord. He hurriedly greeted the old man, and the old man first apologized for disturbing him, and then asked the male protagonist in a friendly manner, "Are you not going to pay the rent this month?" It turned out that the original owner had not paid the rent for more than 3 months, and owed a total of 135 million won. If you add the water, electricity, property, and other miscellaneous expenses, it would cost at least 2 million. Even so, the old man actually let the male protagonist live there until the end of the month. If you really can't pay, you can cancel the lease. I have never met such a good landlord in my life. I was lucky enough to meet one who returned the deposit in full, and I was almost moved. After seeing off the landlord, the male protagonist returned to his room with a sad face. Oh no, he was about to end up on the streets. There are only 14 days left until the end of the month. Is there any way to make money? It would be best if someone had buried it in the ground and forgot to dig it up. Thinking of this, a light bulb suddenly flashed in the male protagonist's mind, and he pounced on his phone. Yes, there is that one. Then he called Jiang Chonghao and wanted to get back the compensation that belonged to him. Jiang Chonghao, who was enjoying a big meal, received a call from the male protagonist. It took him a while to remember the traffic accident. Then he didn't waste any time and directly asked the male protagonist how much money he needed. The classical Chinese male protagonist checked online and saw someone suggested that he should start with 300. Then he thought that he needed 2 million and the other party still owed him a lot, so it shouldn't be a big deal to ask for more. Jiang Chonghao, who hadn't heard a reply, said that if he didn't say anything more, he would hang up. The male protagonist of the classical Chinese novel hurriedly asked nervously, "Is 3 million okay?" At this moment, Jiang Chonghao felt that he was being looked down upon. "You asked me if I could do it for just 3 million? After hanging up the phone, he immediately transferred 3 million to the other party. The male protagonist looked at the account arrival notification excitedly. It was unexpected that he got such a large sum of money so easily, but he soon calmed down because there wasn't much left after paying the rent. Thinking of this, the male protagonist couldn't help but burst into tears. Is there any way for ordinary people to make money quickly? Just then, a phone call came in, and the male protagonist looked and saw it was in Runxing. Come to think of it, I haven't thanked you for what happened before. Could it be that you contacted me first because you were worried? The male protagonist was about to answer the phone. Suddenly I thought of an important thing. It seems that Gillette can earn hundreds of billions with the next copy. The male protagonist, who thought of a way to make money, decisively made an appointment to meet in Runxing. First, he thanked in Runxing for contacting Shen Yu Yen to save his life. As a thank you, the male lead said he wanted to treat in Runxing to a meal, and Runxing was very excited to hear that his elder brother was treating him, and then he only ordered a cup of coffee to save money for the male lead. The male lead agreed happily on the surface, but in fact he was very upset. Why don't you just eat with me? Now the smell of coffee made him want to vomit. Then in Runxing ordered an iced coffee, and the male protagonist asked for a latte, emphasizing that he only wanted latte without coffee, and did not want to add anything with coffee flavor. And Runxing was furious when he heard this. While the waiter said in a cold sweat that he would do his best, the male protagonist looked at the strange reactions of the two people around him in confusion. What's wrong? Have I revealed my alien side? Finally, the male protagonist got to drink the latte without coffee as he wished. The two of them first chatted to liven up the atmosphere, and then the male protagonist began to implant the theme. Runxing, you seem to have only been suppressing dungeon riots recently. Apart from the few times with me, how long has it been since you last entered a void gate? Wen Yen and Runxing began to stutter and couldn't speak, while the male protagonist looked at him seriously. Sure enough, are you afraid of entering an empty door? He was clearly the greatest magician on the planet of magical civilization, but now he has fallen to the point where he can't even pay the rent, and can only make a living by tricking his subordinates into killing monsters and picking up garbage. In order to solve the survival problem, the male protagonist makes an appointment to meet with Xiaomi Di and Runsheng, and then asks the other party if he is afraid of entering the copy. And Runsheng's answer was as he expected. He could not go to the dungeon for the time being. The hero understood this very well. After all, the sudden encounter with high-level monsters and the betrayal of his companions, the fear of brushing shoulders with death, was too cruel for a college student who had just turned 20. But Runsheng, you can't keep following me, the Death Hunter. The male protagonist looked at the other party seriously. You have to form your own team or prepare to become a lone ranger. After hearing what the male protagonist said, and Runsheng's expression instantly fell. He thought the male protagonist was going to abandon him. However, the male protagonist is not a fool, so how could he push away such a free partner? He took a sip of the coffee-free latte and continued, if you are willing, I would like to train you. I can learn how to use your magic and skills. What do you think? Wen Yen and Runxing instantly became excited. Is this true? Of course I would. Seeing the big fish being hooked so easily, the male protagonist was extremely excited, thinking, I am indeed a genius. Now that the decision had been made, they immediately began searching for a suitable copy. The best choice is the ground-level dungeon, the ancient Roman temple, which is not far from the cafe. It is an unpopular dungeon because the chance of drops here is very low, but because of this, it is perfect for training. Just before the start, the male protagonist asked Runxing to demonstrate his main skills first. Wen Yen and Runxing first calmed down his nervousness, then used his main ability to protect the shield. This is a defense made entirely of magic power. The more magic power consumed, the stronger the defense. And Runxing asked cautiously about the male lead. The male protagonist stared at the shield in silence for a while, and asked a question, why only block the front? And Runxing didn't understand why he asked this question, because this skill has been like this since it was awakened. The male protagonist finally understood that the other party was like someone who was using a tool for the first time and didn't know how to do anything at all. So he decided to start teaching from skill understanding. First of all, there is this shield. This skill is to protect the whole body, not just to block the front. However, Runxing simply couldn't understand that although his shield could grow larger, it couldn't change shape. The male protagonist was almost mad at this. What a fool! He then asked Runxing to do it again, and instructed him to use his chest as the center of the skill and to perform a spherical simulation like a crystal ball. And Runxing tried this method, but it still didn't work. However, the male protagonist patted him on the shoulder and asked him to continue, reminding him to remember the image he wanted in his mind. Seeing the male protagonist's serious expression, Runxing also regained his spirits. After many difficult attempts, Runxing finally succeeded in releasing the spherical shield. He was very excited about his first success, but he only moved one step and the shield shattered. Seeing this, Runxing became instantly frustrated. But the male protagonist said it didn't matter, because as long as he succeeded once, all he had to do next was to improve his proficiency. And Runxing was very grateful for the male protagonist's help. He had never thought that his skills could be used in this way. The male protagonist told him that skills can change according to the user's thoughts. The thoughts of the caster have a great influence on the magic power, so those who are a little vain and arrogant have a higher chance of becoming a great magician, just like me, a genius. Just when the hero's little vanity was bursting, Runxing suddenly asked what kind of training to do next, and the hero said that the next step was to do actual combat practice. Only by frequently using skills against monsters can you quickly improve your proficiency. In this way, Runxing started to kill the monsters alone. In battle after battle, he became more and more proficient in using the spherical shield, and finally reached the point where it would not break even if he moved. The male protagonist cheered on the side, saying, well, you did a good job. It was indeed an episode with overwhelming spoils. Besides, the male protagonist has more important things to do. that is, picking up the dropped gold and stone equipment which can be sold for money. Using the excuse of training skills, he picked up the small equipment dropped by the G-Hunter when he killed monsters, alias stealing other people's loot. This is the meaning of teaching. After a while, the male protagonist picked up a bag of magic crystals, which is enough for a month's living expenses, compared with borrowing money directly from Enrunsheng, or asking him to help kill monsters again and again. This method is obviously better. Otherwise, if he makes Hunter G in a bad mood, he will be doomed. After secretly picking up the equipment, the male protagonist asked Enrunsheng how he was doing and whether he had mastered the essentials. However, Enrunsheng's reaction made the male protagonist feel a little strange, and he felt guilty about it. Did he find out about my little trick? The man had just found a way to get rich quickly, but who would have thought that it would be cut off by an acquaintance in the blink of an eye? Just because he took shortcuts and violated relevant regulations, Enrunsheng never felt awe in his life. Whether it was a mentor during my student days, whether it was a star being praised on TV, he would just sigh slightly. It turns out there are such amazing people in the world. But today, Enrunsheng finally understood the meaning of this word, which was simply incomprehensible. Just by looking at his skill once, he was able to deduce its hidden purpose. Moreover, the other party's teaching was as natural as breathing. He had never even heard of the ability to discover other people's hidden skills. But the other party was obviously not an analytical awakener. If he closed his eyes, he could still see someone's calm and composed movements and the golem's heart. So all this is thanks to the other party's keen vision and rich knowledge. The eldest brother is indeed not an ordinary person. At this moment, Enrunsheng's heart is filled with awe. Just when Enrunsheng was shocked, the male protagonist's voice suddenly reached his ears. "Runsheng, what's wrong with you? Are you starting to get the hang of it now?" Enrunsheng felt very embarrassed at this time. Despite his elder brother's careful instruction, he failed to master even one skill. Then he apologized to the male protagonist in person. "I'm sorry, brother. I will practice until I can do it perfectly as soon as possible." I thought the male protagonist would be disappointed, but who would have thought that the male protagonist would calmly say, "Runsheng, don't worry. If you can't do it well today, you can continue tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Anyway, I'm only an F-level student. I have plenty of time." At this moment, the male protagonist's figure was so tall in Enrunsheng's eyes. When he lost confidence in himself, he not only imparted his experience without hesitation, but was even afraid that he would feel burdened by telling such an obvious lie. Enrunsheng secretly vowed in his heart that he must repay this kindness. Then he asked the male protagonist if there was anything he wanted or if there was anything he needed to do. The classical Chinese male protagonist said with a cold sweat on his face that it was really not the case. This answer was within Enrunsheng's expectations. His elder brother was so selfless. He would never be like those people in modern society who would be tempted by a little money. When he first awakened to his ultimate ability, he thought he could do anything. Now he realized how naive he was, and Enrunsheng, who had figured it out, no longer forced himself. "Let's stop here today," as his elder brother said. Then he happily said to the male protagonist, "Let's go back, big brother." At this time, he has made up his mind. He must work hard to train himself, and one day he will help big brother. Unlike Enrunsheng, who has completed his self-strategy, the male protagonist looks guilty. Why did he ask me if I wanted anything? Did he notice something? But judging from his performance, he seems to have no interest in these things. Perhaps for an 11 hunter, these are not worth mentioning at all. If this is the case, then can we enter a higher level space gate next? Just thinking about it, all the male protagonists feel excited. And today's harvest is enough to pay the rent for the next period. He was looking forward to going back and treating himself to something delicious. And this good mood lasted until the two of them walked out of the Ikon gate, because an unexpected person appeared in front of them. The male protagonist didn't understand why Shen Yu Yen appeared here, and Shen Yu Yen first looked at his watch and then spoke. "Hello, Hunter and Runsheng, you came out quite late. It's just a level alien gate." Originally, he came here to inform Enrunsheng, but now he has a question. He looked at the male protagonist seriously. Why would Enflevel appear here? He had just been reevaluated for allegedly falsifying his grade. But as soon as he cleared himself of suspicion, he illegally entered Yikongmen. The male protagonist who was caught red-handed was sweating coldly at this time. What the hell, the door was blocked. Then he immediately explained that he entered as a traitor to help Enrunsheng pick up things. And Enrunsheng, who was standing by, also testified for the male protagonist. But Shen Yu Yen is a little unlucky, don't quibble, how much stuff can you carry in a backpack like the one you're carrying? Of course, and Runxing did not escape a lecture. Assisting in illegal entry into Yaikongmen is also illegal. Although this is the fact, the male protagonist still wants to struggle. He points out that the association clearly does not have any restrictions on surrendering husbands. But Shen Yu Yen was merciless because that was for the real benefit of the husband, not to give some people an opportunity to take advantage of it. He looked at the male protagonist seriously. Don't you understand that such behavior will only attract more suspicion? You know, ordinary level hunters will not easily violate the rules. After all, their lives are very precious. So this attitude of ignoring the level will definitely arouse suspicion. Shen Yu Yen asked them to cooperate, and the male protagonist reluctantly said that he understood, and Runxing, who had just vowed to become stronger with the male protagonist, almost cried. Shen Yu Yen has been too tolerant of the male protagonist so much that he almost forgot that the girl in front of him is only at level B in Awakening and can tear a lion apart with her bare hands, so getting angry will not do anybody any good. In the end, Shen Yu Yen just warned them, then let Runxing go with him. He has a notification about changes in the dungeon area that Runxing is responsible for suppressing. Just like that, Runxing waved goodbye to the male protagonist with tears in his eyes. Looking at the backs of the two people leaving, the male protagonist realized that the way of swiping money just now might not work. But it's not a big problem because he has already prepared brandy. And just after the male protagonist turned around, Shen Yu Yen secretly glanced behind him. What a mysterious man. The first thing the male protagonist did when he woke up the next day was to lie in bed and check his phone. It has become a habit for him to collect hunter information through his mobile phone. This time he got some useful information. An item was finally analyzed. This bracelet was called Gemini Guardian Angel. It first appeared in that X-level copy. The male protagonist kept it and originally planned to compensate Zheng Xiaoxing. But after such a long time, the other party should not need it anymore. The male protagonist wore it for the first time today, and it fits his wrist perfectly. The reason I wear it is because today's experiment is a bit dangerous. The hero came to a strange gate alone. He never thought that one day he would be so nervous because he had no bodyguard. Even though this is the lowest level class alien gates are generally divided into two types, red gates and blue gates. This is a type of blue gate and there is no boss inside. Small monsters will constantly appear in the vast venue, and the door will close when a certain number of them appear. Even the male protagonist can come and go freely here. It is a good place to practice. He is here to kill monsters today. Although the method of quickly making money was blocked due to Shen Yu Yen's warning, it doesn't matter. After all, you can earn some living expenses by killing these level monsters. He was clearly the greatest wizard on the planet of magic civilization, but now he had fallen to the point where he was almost killed by a sheep. In order to make money, the male protagonist entered the level alien space gate that matched his level alone. What appeared in front of him was the blue sky and white clouds and the endless grassland. And not far away from him there was a group of monsters eating grass quietly. They are the original inhabitants of this area, the malfunctioning goats, so named because the sound they make is like a broken violin string. Don't be fooled by their docile appearance. They are among the most dangerous class monsters, and therefore quite valuable. With this thought in mind, the male protagonist opened the bottle of magic amplifier and drank the contents in one gulp. Then he felt the long-lost power spread throughout his body, and powerful magic surrounded him, which undoubtedly attracted the monster's attention. But it was too late because the male protagonist's casting speed was faster than anyone else. He just stretched out his index finger. A small flame formed at the fingertips. Then the flame shot out like a bullet, and gradually grew larger and larger, forming a fireball emitting high temperature. The hero watched this scene calmly. Turn to ashes, monster. As the male protagonist finished speaking, the fireball was getting closer and closer to the target, and it looked like it could really burn it to death. However, just as the fireball touched the target, it disappeared directly into the air. This scene was completely beyond the male protagonist's expectations, so much so that he didn't know how to react for a moment. A wisp of black smoke slowly emerged from the forehead of the goat that was attacked for no reason, which made him angry. In an instant, veins popped out of its body and white smoke came out of its nostrils. It rushed towards the male protagonist with an attitude of fighting to the death. Seeing the collision, The male protagonist was almost scared to death, and a scream came out of his mouth. He ran and complained, "Damn, I knew it would be like this. Flevel magic power is really not enough." He looked back as he ran, fearing that he would be killed by the other party in the next moment. I don't know why this guy runs so fast. Fortunately, he finally passed through an empty goal just before being caught up. The male protagonist who successfully escaped looked back breathlessly. Fortunately, the monster did not run out with him. He was breathing heavily. This body was in worse condition than he had imagined. I ran for such a short while and I was almost exhausted to death. Just as the male protagonist recovered, he heard a voice coming into his ears. He looked back and saw a strange man looking at him excitedly. "Brother, it's you, right? Long time no see." The male protagonist was very confused about this. It seemed like he was seeing this guy for the first time. The other person grabbed the male protagonist's hand and explained that they had taken the hunter qualification exam together. Although the male protagonist had no impression, more and more fragments appeared in his mind as the conversation went on. This means that the other person is really someone the original owner knew before. Instead of continuing to speak, he decided to observe the situation first. The other party talked a lot and had no intention of stopping. This made the male protagonist feel a little annoyed. Does this guy know that there is an alien in human skin in front of him? Finally, the other party said that meeting was fate and invited the male protagonist to form a team. Today they happened to be one person short. After saying that, he pointed in a direction where his teammates were. Where he pointed, there were 3 hunters in full gear. The guy with the strongest magic power and carrying an axe on his back is the captain of this team, an Earth-level hunter. The young man asked the male protagonist what he thought, and if he agreed, he could enter the dungeon immediately. For a weak hunter, there is no more effective strategy than group hunting. However, the male protagonist chose to refuse because he had used up all the magic amplifier for today. Who would have thought that even though he told the truth that his magic power was exhausted, the person on the other side did not waver at all. "It doesn't matter, we're not looking for hunting anyway." It turned out that what they lacked were porters to help pick up things, and they could offer a very high daily wage. When the male protagonist heard that he could get money just by helping to carry things, he instantly became excited. He felt that this was a good suggestion and he could take this opportunity to join the ordinary hunter team and see how they hunted. But he didn't notice the sinister and treacherous expression on the man's face. The male protagonist finally accepted the proposal and followed the others into the dungeon again. Then watched the battle for 3 hours with great interest. The team worked well together, and everyone played an important role in their own position. Simple, comfortable, and safe, just like a skilled primitive man hunting a mammoth. The hunt was completed and the captain took the package from the male protagonist. He generously praised the male protagonist for a good job, saying he was much better than their irresponsible porter. As he said this, he took out a handful of banknotes, snacked them in front of the male protagonist, and then handed them to the male protagonist. The man felt a little embarrassed because it was a bit too high for a porter, but the captain laughed and said that it was what you deserved. As he said this, he also asked the male protagonist if he was free tomorrow. After all, it would be very troublesome to find a new porter. He invited the male protagonist to continue to join them. But when he said this, his eyes were firmly fixed on the twin guardian angels on the male protagonist's wrist. He was the best wizard on the planet of magic civilization, but he was taught a hard lesson by the despicable earthlings. The male protagonist, who had just arrived on Earth, had not yet understood the principle of making money, and had not realized at all that the golden wristband on his hand was coveted by a few scumbags. In the hunter world, there are occasionally people who give up hunting dangerous monsters and instead target novice hunters who are not used to dungeons and spend a lot of money on protective equipment. They look like frogs when hunting their own kind, so it is only appropriate to call them frogs. What's even more disgusting is that they not only robbed equipment, but many of them even killed people for fun, and the male protagonist was undoubtedly targeted by such a group of people. Time quickly came to the next day, and the male protagonist arrived at the agreed location. He is feeling a bit complicated now. Every time he sees the guy who claims to be his friend, he always thinks of something. Oops, you were here first. A familiar face from yesterday appears. The male protagonist asks if today's reward is the same as yesterday's. Of course, I exchanged them for brand new notes. The captain replied enthusiastically. In this way, the male protagonist entered a new F7 copy with them with anticipation. Then he saw what the ugliness of human nature was. After dealing with the monster and squeezing out the hero's usefulness, these people stopped pretending. The captain even hit the male protagonist on the back of the head with a bottle. The sudden blow knocked the male protagonist to his knees on the spot. At this time, the male protagonist still didn't understand what was happening. Do all the damn people on Earth like to fight their own kind? The male protagonist did not faint after being hit like this. The hunters were not in a hurry because the liquid in the bottle was a powerful knockout drug that would take effect in just a few seconds. But they miscalculated in the end. As a former great magician, the protagonist is immune to mental damage caused by coma control. After a while, the other party still hadn't fallen unconscious, and the hunter team finally realized that something was wrong. Faced with this situation, the male protagonist chooses to flee for his superiors. While they were still not able to react, he just stood up and ran. Although the male protagonist successfully seized the initiative, he is just an ordinary person after all. Soon he was caught up by a vine and fell into the air. The one who made the move was the black-haired guy who claimed to be his good brother. When the hero landed again, a huge axe appeared in front of him. The sword hit the hero and he raised his hands consciously and asked them why they did this. Then he noticed that everyone on the opposite side was looking at his left hand. The male protagonist looked speechlessly at the twin guardian angels on his wrist. Could it be that the next moment he waved his hand to the left? And sure enough, the people on the opposite side also swayed to the left. Then he waved to the right again, and the people on the opposite side also waved to the right. Okay, got it. It turns out that everything is the result of this bracelet. This bracelet can block any attack twice, even from S-level monsters. I brought this equipment originally for my own protection, but I didn't expect it would bring me death instead. Of course he couldn't hand it over because the other party would definitely choose to destroy the body. So faced with the aggressive pressure from several people, the male protagonist chose to refuse. Don't move or it'll use up his 2 defensive chances. Once used up, it will lose its magical effect and become an ordinary accessory. However, these words not only failed to work, but also angered the level hunter. He dropped his axe and kicked the male lead away. Are you kidding me? A mere Frank actually wanted to use such a tool. The sharp sound of a fist hitting the cheekbone rang out in the cave, and he cursed every time he hit. Hey, use it, you bastard, use it. Once you run out of equipment, you'll die. What followed was a merciless beating. If this continues, the male protagonist will definitely be beaten to death. He had no choice but to shout loudly, "Wait a minute, I'll give you the equipment, you stop first." One Yen level hunter grinned and said, "It would have been better if we had done this earlier. As expected, violence is the most effective way to solve problems." The male protagonist raised his hand tremblingly. Is this the reality of a glass hunter? It's so sad to have no power. His hand touched the bracelet. As long as he handed it over, everything would be over. It might even include your own life. Just when he was about to give up struggling, he suddenly heard footsteps from a distance. Who broke in at this time? The hunter team looked back, and then they were covered in cold sweat, because the next person who appeared was beyond everyone's expectations. The male protagonist was also shocked. Why did he come? The person who suddenly appeared was the top hunter in Runshing. He was shocked by the scene before him. It turned out that before the male protagonist entered the dungeon, he contacted an Runshang to help him with his skills, and asked him to wait for him at the entrance of the dungeon. And Runshing was very excited when he received the news. He originally thought that he was no longer valuable, but he did not expect that his elder brother still treated him the same as always. He is very clear about his position, which is the ticket for Big Brother to enter the advanced copy. Ever since the two were arrested last time, he thought his brother would not look for him again. I didn't expect that the elder brother would be willing to take out his precious time to teach him skills. It turned out that the eldest brother was his destined benefactor. As a thank you, he bought a cup of coffee for his elder brother, and then Runshing waited at the entrance of the copy. However, half a day passed, and the male protagonist still did not come out. This made Runshing feel something was wrong. It's impossible for a mere level copy to take so much time. Could it be that a mutation occurred, causing the copy level to suddenly increase? Although this situation rarely happens, he decided to go in and take a look just in case. He pushed away the negative emotions in his heart and walked through the door carefully. But what happened next was beyond his imagination. He saw that his beloved big brother was being bullied by a group of minions. This scene made Runshing gasp. The man who was always at ease was now seriously injured, with blood gushing out. Could this be an illusion? But let's think about these later. Compared with this chaotic scene, the more important thing is, you are frogs, right? As Runsheng's cold voice rang out, violent magic power lingered around him. The man just entered a lowest level copy and saw a scene that he could not accept. He never expected that the big brother he was so proud of would be pinned down and bullied by a few minions. This made Runsheng's face look very ugly. He walked towards the guy who looked the strongest step by step, then pressed his head with a gloomy face, and threw him away fiercely the next moment. Although Runsheng had never hit anyone in his life, for a first-level hunter to deal with a team of the highest level, the only thing he needed to pay attention to was to control his strength to avoid killing the opponent in one blow. And Runsheng soon resolved all the battles. But at this moment he felt a little complicated. After all, these guys were too weak. Just when he was confused, the male protagonist's voice came into his ears. Runsheng, thank you. If it weren't for you, I would be finished, big brother. And Runsheng looked back in surprise, only to see the male protagonist walking up to him in a disheveled state. Although his face was covered in blood, the male protagonist's voice was as calm as ever. Did you come in to see me? And Runsheng replied yes, but the next words of the male protagonist made him stunned. I'm sorry, it must be scary to enter the dungeon alone. I'm sorry to have troubled you at this moment. And Runsheng suddenly remembered how long it had been since he entered the dungeon alone. Usually, he would be scared to death just by hearing the word dungeon. But this time, he was thinking about whether his elder brother would get into trouble due to the mutation of the copy. So he rushed in a fit of rage. Could it be that all this was the elder brother's plan? At this time, the male protagonist said that he would leave the copy first, and report these guys immediately after getting out. It was not until then that Runsheng discovered something suspicious. Even though his elder brother was attacked by hunters, he did not show any surprised expression from beginning to end, as if he had expected it. Everything seemed to be arranged in advance, but he did not easily express his doubts, because there was no reason for his elder brother to do such a thing on purpose. At this moment, the male protagonist spoke softly, and Runsheng, if my level was higher, I would definitely team up with you. Not only are you strong, but more importantly, you always think about how to save people. I hope you can understand that you are an amazing awakener. This simple sentence moved Runsheng to tears. Think carefully about why he didn't form a new team and kept standing still. As a defensive hunter, he failed to protect his companions, so he was unable to communicate with the new hunters. Just at this time, something happened that required rescuing a friend from danger. So, brother was deliberately recreating the same situation as before to create a successful experience for me. In this way, Runsheng conquered himself through his own imagination. Yes, this is all big brother's plan. The wounds on my brother's body were all caused by himself while acting. I never thought that someone could go to such lengths for others. And Runsheng, who had figured everything out, spoke with difficulty. Brother, why do you always take care of me like this? The male protagonist in classical Chinese was a little confused and took care of me. And Runsheng nodded with certainty. Oh, really? The male protagonist stopped and said, because you are a good person, that's enough. As expected, he is my elder brother. And Runsheng looked at the male protagonist with admiration. In this way, the two of them walked out of an empty door together. The male protagonist who finally came out asked Runsheng to help call the police, and then said while he was on the phone, sorry, let's start training tomorrow, I have to go home first. Yen and Runsheng was shocked. Shouldn't he go to the hospital first when he got home? But the male protagonist waved his hands to indicate that it was not necessary and he could handle it himself. Then he left without waiting for Runsheng to say anything. And Runsheng looked at this scene with a pause. How could a level player heal himself? Healing potions are very expensive. Did he decide not to continue playing the role of a level player in front of me? At this time, the male protagonist can only say that he wants to cry but has no tears. It hurts so much, my ribs. For the male protagonist, this is a bad week. First, he was kidnapped by human traffickers, and then he encountered robbers who wanted to rob his belongings and almost died. I don't know how many bones he broke. It took him several days to finally recover. I thought I could rest for a few days. But today he was called by the Hunter Association for questioning. The male protagonist just feels annoyed day by day. But no matter how much he complains, nothing will change. Looking at the bracelet sparkling on the table, it was the culprit that caused the last incident. Through investigation, the hero then realized that its price was as high as hundreds of millions. But for some reason, he did not decide to sell it immediately. After all, it can negate any attack twice. Who knows if this thing will be the key to saving lives someday. Especially for a magic-wasting person like him. He can't withstand even slightly weaker attacks, so he should try to carry it inconspicuously in the future. The weather outside was nice, but the male protagonist was in a bad mood because he just went out and encountered a sports car honking its horn frantically. The male protagonist was curious about which lunatic was disturbing others in broad daylight, but when he opened the window of his car, he found that it was indeed a lunatic, Jiang Changho. The woman ended the man's styrofoam life with just a simple phone call, and then she asked the man to do a favor, but the man asked her to pay first. Just now, the male protagonist saw a madman as soon as he went out, and he hurriedly avoided his sight and tried to pretend. Unfortunately, Jiang Changhao didn't give this opportunity. He asked the male lead where he was going at this time. The male protagonist had no choice but to answer, "I want to go to the Hunter Association." "Oops, it's almost time and I'm busy, so that's it." After saying this, the male protagonist was about to run away immediately, but he heard Jiang Changhao's warning from behind, "Get in the car." As soon as he finished speaking, the male protagonist sat in the passenger seat, fastened his seatbelt, and tried his best to hide his inner nervousness. "I am a cultured alien, so I decided to follow Jiang Changhao's advice, but it was definitely not because of fear. Anyway, why did this guy come to my door?" He thought carefully about whether he had done anything wrong. He has been keeping the Zhang Xiaxing incident a secret, and he didn't mention Jiang Changhao's name in the last kidnapping case. There is no reason to be angry. Just as the male protagonist was thinking about it, Jiang Changhao's voice suddenly came, and he had been attacked by those frogs. Was he talking about those robbers? Well, yes, although he was curious about how the other party knew it. Jiang Changhao still answered the question. "I heard you were injured, so I came to see you. Is your injury not serious?" The male protagonist was startled. "Wait, what are you doing here?" Jiang Changhao said while turning the steering wheel, "Let me confirm whether you are seriously injured. This is a dangerous accident. Be it the Exclus dungeon incident or the kidnapping incident. If you think about it carefully, you haven't had a few days of peace at all. I doubt whether you are enjoying an exciting life." Jiang Changhao then said that he brought a gift and asked the male protagonist to open the storage box and take a look. Receiving a gift is always something to look forward to, so there is no need to refuse it. When I opened the box, I saw a crystal bottle filled with liquid. Jiang Changhao explained, "This is recovery medicine, although you don't seem to need it, but since I brought it, I'll give it to you." The male protagonist picked up the bottle and looked at it carefully. "Is this the healing potion on Earth? I see, I heard that he picked this item because he was injured. This often happened in his hometown. Whenever his tentacles were injured, his friends would send him recovery medicine, just like a child with a cold would receive antipyretic medicine. It is a surprise to be treated so kindly on Earth. Thank you. I will make good use of it." Seeing the male protagonist accept it, Jiang Changhao laughed. It was just a small matter. There was no need to be so surprised, right? The male protagonist just didn't expect that someone like the other person would actually do good things, which was indeed surprising. But he won't take this medicine. Who knows if there are any strange ingredients in it. It's better to take it back and study it first. Just then, with a sound of Jia, the car stopped. Jiang Changhao looked at the male protagonist and said, "We're here, get off." The male protagonist was startled by the sudden order to get out of the car. He looked around and found a familiar building in front of him. This was the entrance of the Hunter Association. "It seems that this earthling has already taken me to my destination, although I don't quite understand the situation. I've got off since he asked me to." The male protagonist expressed his gratitude to Jiang Changhao, and then asked a question in his mind, "Why do you take care of me so much?" At the same time, he muttered to himself, "He had threatened me before, saying that he would kill me if I didn't give false testimony. Hearing this question, Zhang Changhao grinned. Actually, I am very interested in hunter training, and you are the one with the most potential, so unless it is absolutely necessary, I don't want to hurt you. Do you understand what I mean? The male protagonist guessed that he probably wanted to continue to save his life for what he was thinking about, so he nodded to show that he understood. Very good, then go quickly, and say that you took too long to take a shower. Zhang Changhao left a short message, then started the car and drove away. Talent training. In order to cultivate talents, he not only defeated the organization that kidnapped the awakened people, but also ran over to deliver medicine as soon as he knew someone was injured. He is truly a true patriot. Although I really want to say this in my heart, it is actually not that simple, because it is difficult for an awakened person who can kill his own kind without hesitation to have such a sense of justice. The male protagonist was lost in thought while holding the healing potion. Why would Zhang Changhao be interested in a FG like me? However, this question puzzled him. One day, the answer suddenly came. He was surfing the internet as usual, and then he discovered a skill. Ambition, this is a positive word, but the male protagonist is not happy at all after reading the skill description. Killing the strong and taking away their ability. Really? Who has such terrible ability to get such a name? At this time, the first person the male protagonist thought of was Zhang Changhao. Think carefully about what Zhang Changhao had done. First, Zhang Changhao once offered to support him in his hunter activities. Second, Zhang Changhao was very sensitive about the promising awakeners being stranded overseas. Third, Zhang Changhao had reminded him not to die. Putting all these together, it seems that Zhang Changhao is just a simple patriot. No matter how you think about it, being targeted by an FG hunter is not a good sign. Now there is only one choice. He must get rid of this garbage FG body as soon as possible, whether it is to transfer it to another body or to heal the lungs. Thinking of this, the male protagonist was restless and immediately took action. But that's what scientific research is all about. It's almost impossible to get ideal results with just one experiment. The male protagonist lay on the ground exhausted. Feeling that everything seemed meaningless, he was reincarnated for retirement. So why did he have to work after reincarnation? Why? Just when the male protagonist was feeling discouraged, there was a buzzing sound from the phone. The male protagonist picked it up and saw that it was an unfamiliar number starting with 010. He picked up the phone without thinking for a long time, but there was no sound from the other end for a long time. He was about to hang up when a familiar voice came from the receiver. Economic hunter? It's me. Can we meet? An hour later, the protagonist sat with his old acquaintance Shen Yu Yen in a park near his home. Shen Yu Yen spoke first. I'm sorry to bother you so suddenly, but I think it's more appropriate to talk about this face to face. The male protagonist said it was okay. Although contacts from the association usually brought no good news, the male protagonist owed Shen Yu Yen a favor, so he had to at least listen to what he said. Shen Yu Yen sat on the steps awkwardly and said, I need your analytical skills. Can you help me for a while? About 2 weeks later, the male protagonist asked if he wanted to identify something. Shen Yu Yen explained that it was not the case. He was working with the police to investigate a case. The criminals left traces in a certain copy, but they could not be analyzed. They have asked a national appraiser to investigate, but have found nothing. In fact, the most capable appraisers are in overseas companies or large associations, and the rest are mixed. Among all the appraisers Shen Yu Yen knows, only the male protagonist does not have a guild, and he also cleared the Mota maze. Then he apologized nervously because they couldn't pay him much. For the appraiser, it is almost equivalent to working for free, even Shen Yu Yen said so. The male protagonist was curious about how little the money was. He thought it was possible that he didn't even have enough money for a meal. I know this is an unreasonable request, but can you help me? Didn't I help you once? However, before he could finish his words, Shen Yu Yen took them back. No, that's not right, just pretend I didn't say that. The male protagonist was a little confused about this, because he did owe the other party a favor. Shen Yu Yen explained that saving people was his duty, and he should not seek repayment for a favor. So he was willing to ask the male protagonist to help with the investigation at his own expense. What's the harm in being thick-skinned at a time like this? It seems that Shen Yu Yen is a man with great conscience. But the hero has a doubt. Shen Yu Yen often cooperates with the police because of his tracking skills, But even so, why was he so enthusiastic about the search? So the male protagonist asked, if you catch the criminal, can you get the bonus? However, the other party's answer was beyond his expectations. No, I don't get any benefits, but we have to do our best, right? After all, every case concerns someone's life. Shen Yu Yen said in a calm tone. These words made the male protagonist feel a little favorable towards him, probably because he had been exploited by his blackheart boss. As soon as I saw such a pure and kind creature, I couldn't help but look at it with admiration. But these are two different things. At this time, the male protagonist spoke indifferently. Shen Yu Yen, just now you said that you would entrust me even if you were to destroy yourself, right? Shen Yu Yen was surprised. Yes. Then you should pay the commission fee now. Although he thinks Shen Yu Yen is a nice person, the male protagonist cannot accept getting something for free. When Shen Yu Yen swallowed nervously. How much? The woman never thought that a bowl of ordinary sliced noodles would attract a senior appraiser. What is this guy doing? From the moment he arrived at the restaurant, this sentence lingered in Shen Yu Yen's mind. With the other party's identification skills, he would be welcomed wherever he went. You have to know that the hourly salary of a senior appraiser is a figure that most people dare not even think about. Shen Yu Yen had come to him prepared to be rejected. Who would have thought that the other party suddenly asked if he could pay now, and ended up just asking me to treat him to a meal? When Shen Yu Yen thought of the other party's serious statement that he would help with the investigation as long as he invited him to lunch for 2 weeks, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. I took him to a small shop I often visited without knowing what was going on. Is it really okay to eat sliced noodles? Shen Yu Yen asked nervously, and the male protagonist said happily, this is delicious. Shen Yu Yen couldn't believe that there was such an awakened person. Most people who gained great power would have indulged in a life of luxury. But he has been living in such a shabby little room. But Shen Yu Yen didn't really trust him. Maybe he was deliberately being frugal so that he could look more like an Flevel Hunter. For example, when the kidnapping happened, why didn't he run away but stayed in the room of the trafficker boss? And why did he sneak into the advanced dungeon? In fact, there were many suspicious places. Thinking of this, Shen Yu Yen glanced at the table across from him with a vigilant look. Why were things going so smoothly? Since his identification ability was announced, many people have extended olive branches to him, but he ignored everything and chose to help himself. Why? Although the situation is urgent and he can only seek help temporarily, he will never let his guard down. Soon the male protagonist had finished eating. Although it was a well-deserved reward, he still felt a little guilty after eating it all. So he carefully looked at the woman opposite him. However, when he found that the male protagonist had been staring at him, Shen Yu Yen held his breath nervously. He always felt an inexplicable oppression when looking at him. Ms. Shen Yu Yen, let's get down to business. What kind of copy do you want to investigate? The male protagonist asked first. When Shen Yu Yen was silent for a while and then said, there are terrorists in the copy. This simple sentence startled the male protagonist, and he couldn't help but shout out, terrorist. Shen Yu Yen quickly reminded him to lower his voice. Next, Shen Yu Yen began to explain that their methods were rather special. They did not carry out terrorist attacks using bombs or the like, but monsters. Shen Yu Yen said seriously that recently someone was found to have deliberately caused a riot in the dungeon. The so-called dungeon riot is when monsters in the dungeon run out. An empty door connecting to the dungeon channel. There is a time bomb rule, usually 7 to 10 days, and 3 to 5 days for smaller projects. If a dungeon is left unattended, the entrance to the dungeon, an empty door, will be destroyed and explode like a supernova, and the dungeon will eventually disappear. The monsters in the dungeon will rush out and run towards the city, so this phenomenon is called a dungeon riot. This phenomenon has also become a catalyst for humans to develop and explore copy technology. After listening to Shen Yu Yen's explanation, the male protagonist frowned. How could someone dare to do such a dangerous thing? He asked if anyone had ever caused a riot in the dungeon. Shen Yu Yen shook his head to indicate that he didn't know and was just starting to investigate. But the male protagonist had a question. Wouldn't the copy disappear after a riot? How to investigate? This question was quickly answered by Shen Yu Yen. That's why I said the criminal left traces, because the copy did not disappear this time. Not long ago, a large-scale rampage of fire attribute monsters occurred in the suburbs, But the copy did not disappear after the monsters escaped. A few days later, the hero came to a red empty door, which was the place that Shen Yu Yen had commissioned to investigate. When the agreed time arrived, Shen Yu Yen showed up on time with someone. Shen Yu Yen told the male protagonist that this person was the person in charge who went in with him. The male protagonist curiously asked Shen Yu Yen, "What about you?" Shen Yu Yen said that he would wait outside, as he, an auxiliary with little combat power, was not suitable to go in. Shen Yu Yen told the male protagonist that this was a Blevel copy, but there were no monsters in it, so he could investigate it with peace of mind. The male protagonist looked at the empty door, and for some reason he always felt a slight sense of disobedience. After several hours of hard work and sweating in the lava field, the male protagonist finally achieved some results. After completing their investigation, the two men walked out of the stuffy dungeon. Before Shen Yu Yen asked what he had found, the male protagonist hurriedly asked him to bring some water. After drinking several bottles in a row, he finally regained the feeling of being alive. Shen Yu Yen asked in a cold sweat what he had discovered. The first thing the male lead said was, "I have bad news for you. I'm afraid it will be hard for us to find out who the criminal is." Hearing this, Shen Yu Yen was shocked. Why? No clues could be found to confirm the identity, and the copy showed no signs of human manipulation. However, he discovered a strange place. The male protagonist pointed to an empty door behind him. This was a passage that the awakened one forcibly twisted open. Hearing this, Shen Yu Yen widened his eyes in surprise and forced the passage open. So this is a false exit. To summarize briefly, terrorists can open new entrances and exits in the instance, and also know how to close the original ones. Shen Yu Yen was curious about why the criminal did this. Was it because of a riot in the dungeon? The male protagonist said that it should not be. By analyzing the copy, the male protagonist thought of several ways to cause a copy riot, so he can responsibly say that the number of channels has nothing to do with the copy. At this time, the male protagonist remembered something. "Shen Yu Yen, you said this kind of strange copy is not the first time, right?" Shen Yu Yen touched his chin and explained that this situation had happened 3 times this year, and the copy that originally had some time left suddenly exploded. The previous crime did not leave any evidence, but this time an empty copy was deliberately left to attract everyone's attention. What is the purpose? Shen Yu Yen guessed that perhaps the criminals this time were not the same group of people as in the previous cases. Although this guess was reasonable, it was still a guess in the end. "Don't enter this copy anymore." The male protagonist pointed to an empty door with a cordon and reminded Shen Yu Yen. But Shen Yu Yen didn't understand why. The male protagonist explained that this fake passage was very unstable and would disappear within a day. When Shen Yu Yen's face turned pale, the only clue disappeared. The male protagonist looked at the empty door with a serious expression. "It seems that we must find new clues quickly. Just participating in the investigation of an ordinary missing persons case. Who would have thought of experiencing the feeling of falling from a high altitude?" Not long ago, the copy that the male protagonist reminded Shen Yu Yen to be careful of disappeared from the market. Just like that, they lost the only clue to track down the criminal. From that day on, the terrorist incidents came to an abrupt end, and the contact between the male protagonist and Shen Yu Yen gradually decreased. The bored male protagonist stayed at home and scrolled through his phone. Recently, everyone is discussing a topic. A series of disappearances occurred in Imping District, with 7 victims, all of whom are ordinary people without magic powers. Who would do this? Just when the male protagonist was confused, a phone call suddenly rang. It was Shen Yu Yen. The male protagonist pressed the answer button without thinking, and a normal conversation followed. The call was not long. Shen Yu Yen always liked to convey information simply and clearly. There is bad news. As the missing persons case in Imping District unfolds, Shen Yu Yen, who has search skills, is appointed as an investigator, and the male protagonist who has signed a 2-week contract with the other party is forced to be involved in the matter. The scene changed, and the male protagonist met Shen Yu Yen smoothly, and then he raised a question. "Searching for missing persons. Miss Shen Yu Yen's ability is enough, right? How can I help?" The male protagonist has reason to suspect whether he is treating himself as free labor. "I was just about to tell you, I just used my ability on those missing people," Shen Yu Yen said seriously, and the result was a very strange position. The first two people couldn't be found at all, but the skill worked normally when searching for the last person. Their location is underground. Hearing this, the male protagonist was shocked. What? Could it be that the missing person was buried alive in the ground? He had already smelled the scent of a major crime, but Shen Yu Yen's doubts did not end there, because his skills could only confirm the target's identity and could track his location even if that person was dead. However, the coordinates of the first two cases could not even be found. It was obvious that someone was deliberately interfering, so Shen Yu Yen suspected that the murderer deliberately led them here. So you asked me to come here just to explore the trap. The male protagonist complained accurately, and Shen Yu Yen explained nervously, indeed, this kind of situation is generally not called a misidentification. I just think it's safer to have an active hunter. Hearing this, the male protagonist almost laughed out loud. What's the point of being active? I'm already an antique. Shen Yu Yen seemed to hear the male protagonist's muttering. What did you say? The male protagonist naturally changed the subject and said it was nothing. After all, there was no use complaining to him. In this way, several people continued to search for the missing person. Soon Shen Yu Yen stopped and said, "Everyone, this is it. The missing person is right under our feet." If the missing person buried underground did not move, there was only one possibility, and everyone fell into a brief silence. Soon the area was cordoned off, and all the police officers who had been conducting separate investigations gathered here. The police chief then arranged for one group to search the area, while another group started digging the ground. Shen Yu Yen asked the male protagonist to patrol the surroundings with him. Perhaps there might be some clues on the mountain. The male protagonist asked curiously, "Aren't you responsible for directing the scene? My mission has ended, and I have used up all the skill tracking times I can use today." After Shen Yu Yen explained the situation, he immediately gave a wry smile and said, "After 3 investigations, I am just a useless shell. It's just an empty shell." The male protagonist didn't respond much to this sentence, but the conversation continued. "By the way, if you find any dangerous items nearby, please tell me immediately." Although he didn't need to be told that the male protagonist was already detecting, he still nodded and said that there were no magic traps nearby. Shen Yu Yen laughed and said that was great, but the next moment he seemed to realize something. He suddenly stopped and said, "Economic hunter, please wait a moment." The male protagonist raised his head when he heard Shen Yu Yen's voice. "What?" Shen Yu Yen pointed in a direction. "Do you see that?" It seemed like there was someone standing next to that tree. The protagonist's eyesight is not very good. Although it is better than his previous life living in Shanghai City, it is not much better. He couldn't see what Shen Yu Yen was pointing at, so he simply scanned the magic fluctuations over there, and then a human figure surrounded by a faint magic appeared in his field of vision. "There is an awakened person there," the male protagonist explained. "When Shen Yu Yen once, an awakened person." "Really?" After getting confirmation, Shen Yu Yen hurried back to call for help. The male protagonist was a little confused about who was behind the tree. Was it a mountaineer or someone related to the case? Although his magic power was only level 1, he seemed to be biting something. At this moment, Shen Yu Yen and his men came back. He pointed in a direction and said, "It's right there." Then the next moment, something unexpected happened. When the figure swallowed the food in his mouth, his strength, which was originally at level 1, suddenly surged. At this moment, feeling the flow of magic power on the other person, the hero suddenly realized that something was wrong. Wait, could this guy's target be? He suddenly turned around and looked to the side, then shouted at Shen Yu Yen, "Stand back." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand towards Shen Yu Yen, intending to push it away. But it was too late. The Awakener skills had already been released. Although the male protagonist realized what was happening, his sluggish body couldn't keep up, so the male protagonist had to tell Shen Yu Yen not to panic, and Shen Yu Yen asked why. "Because we are about to fall." As the male protagonist finished speaking, a strong feeling of falling quickly spread throughout his body. There was a blue channel at the spot like a beast's big mouth, which instantly swallowed up everything where they were. What makes a woman cry so hard? Just now, the protagonist and his companions fell into the portal. After a long fall, they fell into a small lake. The male protagonist, who was an aquatic creature in his previous life, lay on his back on the water with an expressionless face. Feeling that his back was almost broken, Shen Yu Yen couldn't swim and was calling for help, and another policeman who fell with him rushed over to rescue him. Shen Yu Yen was soon rescued to shore, but he seemed to have choked on a lot of water. The policeman shouted his name anxiously and pressed his abdomen lightly with his hands. Finally, Shen Yu Yen coughed up a mouthful of water, and the police felt relieved. He turned around and asked the male protagonist who had climbed ashore what happened. Did they fall into the dungeon? Then I got a definite answer from the male protagonist. There are 3 people involved in this incident: Shen Yu Yen, the second-rank policeman, and the male protagonist. It's a pity that the police captain didn't fall in. At this moment, the blue light pouring down from the top of my head suddenly disappeared, and the entrance to the dungeon was closed. Could it be that terrorist? Now the male protagonist has finally roughly figured out the outline of the missing case in Anping district. His mind was too confused. So the hero decided to calm down and figure out the current situation. Unfortunately, he didn't even have time to do that. He saw 2 heads popping out from behind a rock not far from them. Are you hunters? The police were shocked when they saw this. Oh my God, missing people, are you the missing high school students? The 2 children ran out crying. Yes, we survived. They threw themselves directly into the arms of the police. You are here to save us, right? Officer, get us out of here. There were 6 people captured here, the rest died. Only 2 of us are still alive. The surviving high school student was crying and talking. The policeman was stunned at first, then put on a reliable expression. Don't worry, wait a moment. As he said that, he took out a portable analyzer, and then the basic information of the copy appeared. Dungeon name, Winter in Istanbul, level, B. The level copy is considered to be of a fairly high level, but the situation is not too bad because there is an awakened person here who can fight against monsters. The male protagonist asked them to calm down and told them that there were not many monsters here and a level hunter could clear the dungeon. After that, the male protagonist walked towards Shen Yu Yen. Shen Yu Yen, let's start hunting first. Maybe there will be a new exit. However, when he saw the other person's face clearly, the male protagonist was speechless. Finally, she called softly, Shen Yu Yen. She seemed not to hear the male protagonist's words, and after a long time she trembled and said, let me out, I can't stay any longer, please take me away from here. Completely unable to communicate, she even began scratching her arms with her nails. Her eyes filled with fear. Shen Yu Yen has been living a very ordinary life since childhood, but she is content with her life. Get up in the morning to go to school, and after school help parents run the tea garden. Shen Yu Yen especially likes this green tea field. Her parents don't want their daughter to do hard farm work and persuade her to go play with her friends. However, the young Shen Yu Yen said that she prefers picking tea leaves. In short, whenever she has time, she will diligently help her parents. It was a sunny day like any other day, but the peace was broken that day. A red alien gate suddenly appeared, and a strange bird flew out of it. Shen Yu Yen and her mother were trembling with fear. However, facing the monster that pounced on Shen Yu Yen, her mother threw it behind her without hesitation. Then the strange bird bit her mother. For her mother, her father rushed forward without hesitation. The strange bird bit her mother and flew towards the alien gate into a passage shining with red light. Her father grabbed the claws of the strange bird without any fear and was taken in. Then the passage appeared for only a moment and then closed. On that day, copy riots broke out simultaneously in various parts of the world. From that day on, Shen Yu Yen's life began to fall apart. On the same day, Shen Yu Yen, who lost her parents, awakened to become a level hunter, but she could never return to the green tea garden. Just like the little boy who drove his Maybach off the overpass on a rainy night, he can never go back to that day. Time goes back to the present. The male protagonist gently pats Shen Yu Yen's back. Shen Yu Yen, can you hear me? I originally thought I would be safe with a brink hunter, but I didn't expect things to turn out like this. The only awakener who can fight monsters here has a dungeon panic disorder. Why didn't he realize this earlier? It had only been 7 years since the first riot in the dungeon. During this time, countless people had lost their lives. Some had recovered from the grief of losing their loved ones, while others were still immersed in pain. Looking at Shen Yu Yen's rapid breathing, the hero knew that if he couldn't calm her down, everyone would die. Shen Yu Yen, take a deep breath. The male lead patted her shoulder and said, from now on I will count to 3 seconds. You slowly calm down. 1, 2, 3, to be honest, this is almost a life-threatening act. If Shen Yu Yen felt that she was in danger and fought back, her body would instantly disintegrate. Fortunately, the worst situation did not happen. After hearing the male protagonist count, Shen Yu Yen quickly resumed normal breathing. The male protagonist carefully observed the other person's face. Although it was still pale, it was obvious that they could communicate. If you calm down and listen to me, this is a brink instance, but this policeman is only drank and am frank, so only you can really deal with those monsters. The male protagonist told Shen Yu Yen that he was the only hope. However, Shen Yu Yen buried his head in his knees and said with a gasp, "No, I can't do it." "Why not? Can't you hunt outside?" The Facino killer, the male protagonist questioned when they first met, but Shen Yu Yen said, "That was clever. I have never fought a monster of the same level." Shen Yu Yen asked the male protagonist if he couldn't help. The male protagonist asked her to calm down and emphasized that he was only F grade. But Shen Yu Yen just thought she was lying. "Why do you do this to me? Help me, help me." Shen Yu Yen's voice became louder and louder, and the male protagonist was speechless. Did he think I was faking my level? He was clearly in charge of the test, so why didn't he believe it? "You know I can only search, what do you want me to do?" Shen Yu Yen shouted angrily, tears silently falling, but unfortunately the male protagonist was not moved at all. "Can you really not do it? If you don't show up, everyone here will die. I really can't do it." Shen Yu Yen roared with all her strength, but the male protagonist patted her shoulder. "Cheer up, Shen Yu Yen. The ability you awakened is not search at all." The woman was busy escaping from the monster 1 second, and the next second she threw a big bee on the monster's face. Back to a while ago, the hero almost accidentally started his third character setting. He first tremblingly pulled the monster's tail out from his shoulders, then gritted his teeth and took out a bottle of magic amplification potion and swallowed it. He then began to use magic to repair his broken body, and soon his body was restored to its original state. Shen Yu Yen looked towards the male lead worriedly. Is he really okay? Even if there is medicine, the injury looks quite serious. However, at this time, the male protagonist's voice suddenly came, and the treatment had been successfully completed when Yen and Shen Yu Yen were shocked, and saw that the male protagonist really walked out intact. But how is this possible? Such a large wound disappeared in an instant. A healing potion of that level would cost at least tens of millions. Is this something an Frank Hunter can produce? The adrenaline from the battle gradually subsided. Shen Yu Yen regained her composure, and the doubts that had been forgotten before resurfaced in her mind. However, the male protagonist did not give him time to think. He directly said to Shen Yu Yen, "Let's start attacking the boss." The basic principle of the dungeon is that an exit will appear after defeating the boss. Since you have just used a skill once, you must go to the boss room as soon as possible while that feeling is still there. The male protagonist told Shen Yu Yen not to worry. He would assist her as much as possible. After a while, they began to explore the copy. The male protagonist comforted the nervous Shen Yu Yen, while slowly guiding her to practice her skills. Shen Yu Yen originally hated her ability because the moment she lost her family was deeply imprinted in her mind, so that she would feel suffocated every time the wind blew. "Miss Shen Yu Yen, this is your weapon, don't be controlled by it, try to control it." After hearing these suggestions, Shen Yu Yen unexpectedly discovered that she could also perform very well. Just as the male protagonist expected, Shen Yu Yen's innate abilities are very powerful. Soon, they defeated almost all the small monsters in this instance. Now there is only one treasure left to be dealt with. "Can we go out now?" came a student's expectant voice. Shen Yu Yen wanted to answer in the affirmative, but for some reason, her throat seemed to be blocked by something and she couldn't speak. Although she is a powerful class awakener, she has been hiding in the office and doing paperwork. As for the experience of raiding dungeons, naturally I have no experience at all. She actually has to deal with a treasure of the same level. To be honest, she was scared. "Miss Shen Yu Yen, let's take a short break." The male protagonist who was observing from the side suddenly said that there was nothing much to do even though it was called a rest. After all, Shen Yu Yen didn't even have an expensive piece of equipment, so what was there to rest for? Is Shen Yu Yen Hunter still not good enough? After a moment, the male protagonist walked up to Shen Yu Yen who was curled up in the corner and whispered, "This is not your fault. This is a completely understandable trauma. After all, it was wrong for me to force you up. At this point, the male protagonist began to apologize. After all, it was a matter of life and death, and his tone had been a bit harsh before. But the situation is urgent. Please hold on a little longer. As long as you succeed this time, you will be able to survive no matter what level you face in the future. After listening to the male protagonist's encouragement, Shen Yu Yen finally relaxed, and a hint of confusion slowly appeared at the corners of her mouth. Then she stood up. The male protagonist was stunned and asked her to rest for a while. But Shen Yu Yen said, "I have recovered. Let's go into the reporting room." Hearing this, the male protagonist took the lead and walked towards the door of the room. Through the slightly open stone door, the monster's low roar could be heard. It is quite large, about 4 or 5 meters tall. Because it is very dangerous, only the male protagonist and Shen Yu Yen go in, and the others stay here first. Shen Yu Yen swallowed nervously as she entered the boss territory. With the dim light of the mineral lamp, the leader here can be seen from afar. She walked on all fours like a lion, but her face was as fierce as a half-melted candle. The male protagonist did not see any obvious weaknesses in her. Directly using skills to suppress may be the best method. Shen Yu Yen said she understood, and then made a soft sound. Then a strong wind cut through the air, and sharp blades rose towards the monster's neck. However, the monster reacted too quickly and dodged to the side. Shen Yu Yen, who failed to hit the target, stood there in a daze when she bumped into the male protagonist. She loudly reminded him to get out of the way. The enraged boss opened her mouth wide, and ice-blue energy gathered in her mouth. Then a cold current spurted out from the boss' mouth, and the hero dodged in panic. Shen Yu Yen raised a wall to block it, but the next moment the monster pounced on her with its bloody mouth wide open. Shen Yu Yen barely dodged the attack with a sliding tackle. After steadying herself, she aimed her skill again. This attack hit the boss Hedon. The male protagonist watched the battle worriedly. Shen Yu Yen was obviously tired. At this time, the magic power in her body was almost exhausted. Even with her help, it was not easy to defeat the boss of the same level. Not to mention that today was her first time using her abilities. But fortunately, compared to Shen Yu Yen Hunter, it seems that guy will fall first. The woman clearly had the potential to become the strongest magician, but she burst into tears after being defeated by a simple copy. It was because she awakened the same ability as the monster that killed her parents. Seeing Shen Yu Yen's emotional breakdown, the male protagonist patted her shoulder. "Cheer up, Shen Yu Yen, the ability you awakened is not a search ability at all. What you actually awakened is the wind ability. Isn't it? On this planet that is completely enveloped by atmosphere, is there any awakener as powerful as you?" It turns out that Shen Yu Yen has been hiding her true nature. She is an atmosphere manipulator at heart. The male protagonist knew this from the first time they met, but never mentioned it. Shen Yu Yen looked at the male lead in disbelief and asked, "How did you know?" Then she explained that she did not lie, but the hero did not understand what she meant. Then I heard Shen Yu Yen say that she couldn't use any skills at all and her awakening ability didn't work. It turned out that the monster that killed her parents 7 years ago was a wind-controlling monster, and she happened to have awakened the monster's ability, so every time Shen Yu Yen tried to use her skills, that memory would come to her mind so that she couldn't use her abilities at all. When the male protagonist heard this, he was stunned. There was no such case in her hometown. Psychological problems made magic inoperable. This was completely a characteristic of beginners. After thinking for a moment, the male protagonist slowed down his tone and said, "Hunter Shen Yu Yen, in my opinion, there is nothing wrong with your body. In other words, you can use your ability at any time as long as you make up your mind. You are the most powerful hunter in the same level, and you can easily deal with the monsters here, believe me," the male lead said in a firm tone, but even so, Shen Yu Yen was still hesitant. "Can I really do it?" In the final analysis, she didn't believe in the male lead at all. It was obviously not Flevel, so why did she stand by and watch? Just when the two were in a stalemate, a scream suddenly came. "Ah, run away." They looked in the direction of the sound and saw a monster flying out of the dark cave. The damp cave and the monster with its wings spread out were exactly the same as the accident 7 years ago. Shen Yu Yen recalled the fear of being dominated by the monster again. She was so scared that she trembled all over and could not move. "Miss Shen Yu Yen, run away quickly," the male protagonist shouted at Shen Yu Yen. But seeing that she didn't respond at all, he finally chose to give up, because those who are supposed to live will always live. But the problem lies in the behavior pattern of this monster. Why does it ignore the people who are standing still and instead targets itself? It was raining all night in Ulu, and the hero was tripped by a stone and fell to the ground. Then the monster caught up with the hero and made an attacking gesture. Finally, the hero, who was in a desperate situation, shouted loudly, "Hunter Shen Yu Yen, help me!" But Shen Yu Yen, who was in a panic, did not hear the voice. However, the scene that followed suddenly woke her up. Her chaotic consciousness was violently pulled back to reality. She saw blood splashing in the air, and the tail of the flying monster pierced the man's shoulder like a hook. Even though they were far apart, the sound of the shoulder armor thumping could still be clearly heard. At this moment, a strong thought emerged in Shen Yu Yen's mind. What was going on? Could it be that she didn't hide her level and was really just an level weakling? Chaos suddenly struck. What should I do? If this continued, the monster would escape with its prey, drag it into a deep cave, and kill him as cruelly as his loved ones. The terrible scene that day overlapped with reality again, and at this moment, a sudden pain broke out in her heart. Enough! Shen Yu Yen shouted angrily, and as she roared, a sense of majesty blew up from nowhere. Shen Yu Yen was shocked by the scene before her and unconsciously released magic. That was the power she wanted to use to protect her parents 7 years ago. The airflow turned into a sharp blade, tearing the steel-like body of the Blevil monster apart as easily as cutting a finger. Shen Yu Yen killed the Blevil monster with just a raise of her hand. But before she could be happy, she immediately rushed forward because the male protagonist was falling down. Finally, Shen Yu Yen rushed forward and held the male lead in a princess hug. Shen Yu Yen breathed a sigh of relief after successfully saving him. She put the male lead on the ground and asked nervously, "Are you okay? What should I do?" As she spoke, she searched her body, but found that she didn't bring any recovery medicine. However, the hero who had just escaped from the brink of death said this first. "Miss Shen Yu Yen, you just used your skills. I told you that you can do it. Thanks to you, I survived." When Shen Yu Yen shed tears silently, the reality was completely different from her daily nightmare. With this power, she was finally able to save others, even in the chaos. This fact still left a deep impression in her heart. At this moment, the policeman who escaped with the 2 children rushed back. Seeing the miserable appearance of the male protagonist, he asked worriedly if he was okay. Shen Yu Yen immediately asked the policeman if they had any emergency tools, but unfortunately the policeman said no. The male protagonist scanned the scene and then quietly sat up. The police reminded him not to move around, but the male protagonist said it was okay and asked everyone to step aside as he was going to take off his clothes and use the recovery medicine. He said he had recovery medicine. Shen Yu Yen looked at the male protagonist in confusion. He was so calm despite having holes on his body. It was a bit too much. Shen Yu Yen secretly wondered if this man was injured too badly and had lost consciousness.